Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. It was the kind of rain that didn't splash, didn't beat down, didn't soak in. It simply lingered. Thin veils of it hung in the air like threads of breath in cold fog. Elias had been walking for hours through it, and still his coat was only damp. The moisture wasn't in the clothes, it was in the bones. He was used to hiking alone, used to silence, used to empty paths in the deep woods of the north, where no reception reached and no signs told you where you'd gone wrong. The way the world folded around the mountains and cedars out here made time feel slow and space feel soft. He'd always loved that, loved getting lost in it. But today was different. Today something found him. It had started with a noise, not a loud one. Just a single sharp crack from behind a copse of thin firs, like a twig splitting, then nothing. Not unusual in the woods. Animals did that sort of thing. But it wasn't the sound itself that made him stop mid-stride. It was the fact that the birds stopped too. One moment, their chirps laced the air with casual rhythm. The next, they vanished, as if a hand had scooped the sound right out of the sky. He'd only heard that once before, when a mountain lion had come within 100 yards of his camp 2 summers ago. The forest knew when something didn't belong. So did Elias. He stood still for a long minute, breathing slowly, hand resting near the knife on his hip. Nothing stirred. The rain hung quiet in the spaces between branches, and the trees stood motionless as if bracing themselves. That's when he saw it. A path, where there hadn't been one. He blinked. It wasn't just a game of shadows. He'd been walking this trail for the better part of 2 days. It cut through an old logging route, abandoned and half overgrown. He knew it like the lines on his hand. There was no fork here. But now, off to the left, just behind 2 birch trunks that stood too close together, there was a gap. A clean gap. A corridor of trees, perfectly aligned, arching over a dirt track so dark it looked like scorched ash. There was moss along the sides as if it had been there forever. Elias hadn't seen it 5 seconds ago. He felt it first in the pit of his stomach. That shift. That wrongness. Like the world had breathed in, and something had changed while his eyes were closed. His boot moved toward it before his brain agreed. He told himself it was curiosity. He was used to exploring strange detours. That was the whole point of his trips into the wild. But as he stepped between the birch trunks, the air changed. It smelled old, like wet paper, like stone sealed in cellars. And the moment he stepped onto the new path, the forest behind him dimmed, not darkened, dim. Like walking from a sunlit room into one lit by firelight and memories. The change was slow but total. Colors dulled. The blue-green hue of the pine needles faded to almost gray. The drizzle, still present, sounded further away, as if the trees were swallowing the sound. Rain without rhythm. He paused and turned. The way behind him, the trail he knew, was gone. It wasn't just obscured by branches. It wasn't there. Where there should have been the clearing and his footprints in the pine needles, there was only more of this narrow, overgrown trail. As if the forest had shuffled itself while he blinked. Like the map had rewritten itself around him. His hand brushed against a tree trunk. It was warm. Too warm. Like it had absorbed heat from a fire hours ago and hadn't let go. He withdrew his fingers slowly and squinted into the deepening twilight. He could hear something now. Not words. Not yet. Just the suggestion of rhythm. Low, delicate. Too soft to be footsteps. But not wind either. A kind of movement. A tremble beneath the leaves. Ahead, deeper down the trail, the trees began to change. They grew straighter. Taller. Bark so dark it almost gleamed like coal. And between their trunks, far off but unmistakably there, were glimmers of pale yellow light. Small. Flickering. Like lanterns or candles swinging gently just out of reach. Elias's mouth was dry. His heart wasn't panicked, not yet. But it was careful now. Measured. He took another step. Then another. The forest did not welcome him. It did not reject him. It merely allowed him. As if it had been waiting for someone like him to finally look in the wrong direction. To notice the path that wasn't there yesterday. That maybe was never supposed to be there at all. The further he walked, the clearer the lights became. They were hung from things. Not branches. Not posts. Things that stood still in the forest with twisted backs and arms too long and too thin to belong to trees. Shapes that didn't move when the rain shifted. Shapes that didn't breathe. Shapes that looked back. Elias froze. All the flickering lights winked out at once. And then, from behind him, closer now than before, came the soft, unmistakable sound of breathing. Not his. Elias didn't turn around, not yet. He'd learned from experience that when your instincts screamed at you in the woods, you didn't rush to look or run or shout. You listened. You waited. Because the wrong sound, the wrong movement, could invite the thing that had been waiting for you. The breathing was faint, almost gentle, like someone trying not to be heard. Slow, quiet inhales. Then slight pauses. Almost watching. He couldn't see anything behind him, only the path ahead. Dark earth slick with thin layers of mud, and trees that seemed impossibly still, unnaturally so. As if the rain had stopped falling in this space, even though he could still hear its distant patter, muffled somewhere behind the canopy. Elias's fingers brushed the handle of his blade. He didn't draw it. Steel could be a promise in the forest, a signal that you expected violence. And sometimes the forest accepted that promise. He inhaled through his nose, deep and slow, then exhaled. Come. The breathing behind him didn't change. Not louder. Not closer. Just there. He finally turned inch by inch. There was nothing. The path behind him was still there, narrow, dark, lined by trees like silent watchers, but empty. Yet the moment he completed his turn, the air shifted again. The way it does when a large animal has just slipped away from your periphery. Stillness with a taste of something gone. But it left something behind. On the ground, right in the center of the path where he just walked, was a single object. A matchbox. Worn, blackened by time or fire. The corners were curled. It looked old. Elias crouched slowly, rain tickling his shoulders again as it returned softly above. He didn't touch it right away. The forest watched. He could feel it watching. Finally he picked it up. The front had an illustration, faded but still visible. A hand holding a lantern, the light inside a pale yellow. No words. Just the image. The matchbox felt oddly dry despite the rain. It made no sound when he shook it. He slid it open. Inside was a single match, long and slightly curved, like it had been carved by hand. The wood was darker than any matchstick he'd seen before, almost blue-black. The tip was pale gray. He stared at it. And then, almost as if carried on the air between the trees, he heard the whisper again. Only this time it was not behind him. It was above. One word, breathed more than spoken. Light. The air snapped colder around him. His breath fogged. He didn't remember taking the match out, but now it was in his hand. He didn't remember dragging it across the side of the box, but now there was a spark. And when the match flared to life, the forest changed again. The trees drew back subtly. Shadows peeled away from trunks like ink retreating from flame. The trail became sharper, the color richer in a way that made Elias's stomach tighten. He realized just how wrong it had looked before, how gray everything had been, like a dream in fading charcoal. The match burned with a flame that wasn't normal. It wasn't orange or yellow or blue. It was all of them at once. It flickered too slow. It pulsed like a heartbeat. He should have dropped it. He should have. But he held it aloft like the image on the box and stepped forward again. That's when he noticed the markings. Not on the trees but between them. Faint lines in the air, like threads of spider silk, glinting only in the strange matchlight. They stretched from trunk to trunk, forming shapes. Not cobwebs. Not vines. Symbols. Spirals. Runes. All around him. They had been there all along. Elias kept walking. He didn't know why. His legs just kept moving. Part of him wondered if that was the forest's will, not his own. But the matchlight showed more now, shapes that had been waiting just past the veil of sight. On either side of the trail, statues began to emerge. No, not statues. Figures. Carved from wood or stone, or maybe something else entirely. Their forms were crude, vaguely humanoid, but too tall. 7-8 feet. Limbs too long. Heads low and sloped like mourning animals. Their faces were smooth, blank, except for small hollows where the eyes should have been. Each one held a small object at its chest. He passed the first and realized the object was a skull. Too small to be human. Maybe a bird. Maybe something older. He passed the second. This one held what looked like a bundle of twigs tied with red string. The third held another lantern, just like the matchbox image. The flame in his hand sputtered. The trees thickened again. The path narrowed. And up ahead, finally, he saw it. A structure. Not a cabin. Not a shelter. It rose too high, spindly and crooked, as if made by hands that had forgotten what homes were supposed to look like. Branches lashed together, bark peeled and knotted. A roof of wet leaves. A doorway shaped like an eye. The flame in his hand dimmed. Then, in that last moment of flicker, Elias saw what lay just inside the doorway. A chair. And something sitting in it. Something that rose. He dropped the match. Darkness fell like a curtain. The darkness fell too fast. There was no gradual fade as the match slipped from Elias's fingers. No chance for his eyes to adjust, no lingering glow from the flame. It was as if the moment it left his hand, the forest swallowed it, and him with it. The trees drew in. The cold surged. And the thing in the doorway of the crooked shelter stood. He couldn't see it, not exactly. It wasn't lit, wasn't backlit. And yet, he knew it had risen. Felt it like a weight shifting in the air. Something massive and raw. Elias stood frozen. The cold had teeth now. His limbs didn't tremble, but they felt far away, slowed like he was moving through syrup. Somewhere beneath his ribs, his heartbeat kicked once, hard. The silence pressed in. Then something clicked. Not from the structure ahead, but beneath him. He looked down. The match hadn't landed in mud or leaves. It had hit something solid, smooth. The rain, still somehow falling without falling, had cleared a layer of dirt around it. Elias crouched, one hand to the ground, and felt the texture. What? Old wood. He brushed more dirt away. Revealed a board. Then another. A floor. A platform buried beneath moss and roots, right under the path he'd walked. He was standing on something ancient. And just ahead, within the skewed eye-shaped entrance, something shifted again. Slow. Deliberate. It didn't approach. Not yet. But it was aware now. Elias swallowed. He couldn't see it, but every part of him knew it was waiting for him to move. To speak. To break the standoff. The match had been a signal. It had lit something older than the flame. And now the dark was full of presence. He took a single step back. The air whined. A high-pitched, needle-thin sound cut the space between him and the doorway. Not loud, but sharp. Like a metal wire being tightened too far. His foot froze mid-step. The noise ceased. He understood then, no sudden moves. So instead he spoke. Who's there? His voice sounded wrong in the space. Flattened. Absorbed. Like shouting into a blanket. No echo. No bounce. The forest did not return it to him. He tried again. I saw the lights. I followed the path. I'm not here to take anything. Still nothing. And then, a sound from the doorway. Not words, but laughter. Drat. Crack. Not joyful. Not even amused. It sounded like something trying to remember what laughing was supposed to be. It stopped too soon. Elias could barely breathe. And then came the voice. Oh, paper thin. Spoken just once, just loud enough. One match. One guest. The doorway pulsed darker. Was that you? Elias asked quietly. Silence again. He reached for his flashlight, his fingers brushing the nylon strap of the pack at his side. Another click from below his feet. He froze. Then, faintly, barely perceptible, a shift in his surroundings. Not in the trees, not in the air. In the ground. He looked down again. The boards beneath him had begun to form a pattern, where the rain had landed on their surface, dulling them into dark streaks. The droplets weren't random. They were forming circles. Concentric circles. He stepped back once more. This time, nothing stopped him. The forest gave no warning. But up ahead, from within the shack, something did move forward now. Elias's skin crawled. He didn't see legs. Didn't hear footsteps. Just forward movement. As if the shadows themselves had leaned into him. The shape passed the doorway. It was tall. Too tall. A head that nearly scraped the sagging lintel beam. Its arms hung slightly forward. Not like a person's. More like something that had adapted to movement on all fours and only just remembered how to stand. And it wore cloth. Tattered, soaked, clinging. It was dressed in someone. A shirt. Human. Torn flannel. Mold on the collar. The sleeves dripped water that never hit the ground. Elias backed up again. Then again. And again. But the creature didn't come further. It simply stood at the edge of the lightless doorway watching him. Or maybe listening. Then, from its left shoulder, dangling, something swung slowly into view. A lantern. Identical to the one on the matchbox. Its flame lit suddenly. No spark. No kindling. It was just there. A pale yellow pulse, steady. Quiet. And beneath it, where it should have illuminated the figure's chest and face, there was nothing. Not blackness. Nothing. Elias took another step back, and this time the wood beneath his boot snapped. Not a crack from a twig. A snap like a pressure seal breaking. The boards below his feet opened. He didn't fall through them. They opened inward like trapdoors. The forest floor collapsed in 4 directions. Wide, slow, like a ritual being completed. Rain spiraled above. Wind rushed upward, not downward. And beneath him, stairs. Descending. down into dark older than the forest above. The voice spoke again right behind his ear this time. Down is the deal. Elias turned. No one was there. He looked at the thing in the doorway. It hadn't moved. The lantern still glowed. And then, from above, somewhere behind the treetops, the rain stopped. All at once. And the silence pressed down like stone. Elias looked at the stairwell beneath him and stepped down. 1 foot, then another. And the wooden doors above sealed quietly shut. There was no echo. That was the first thing Elias noticed as he moved down the stairs. The air around him didn't allow sound to stretch. Each footfall landed softly, eaten by the dark. Not even the creak of wood, not the shuffle of boots on damp grain. The space below didn't reflect anything. It simply consumed. He wasn't sure how long he'd been walking. The descent was slow, cautious. The walls around him were close, earthen at first, packed with roots and the scent of deep, wet soil. But soon the texture changed. He reached out and felt something cold, smooth. Not stone. Not quite wood either. It was hollow feeling. Like carved bark that had been dried, lacquered, and then set too long in silence. It had the subtle give of something once alive. Not the forest above, but something that had once watched it. He didn't like touching it. The matchbox sat in his pocket again. He didn't remember putting it there. He didn't want to light another. The single match he'd used had shown him things he couldn't unsee. Things that weren't shaped for light. Down here it felt wrong to even think about flame. The stairway turned abruptly to the right. Then again. He looked up. There was no trace of the trapdoor now. No suggestion that a forest had ever existed above. It might have been a mile up, or more. Or maybe it had never been there. The walls glistened now. Moisture moved in thin threads but didn't drip. Elias touched one with the back of his knuckle. It was warm. The air wasn't cold anymore. It was thick, heavy, humid, and pulsing faintly with something he didn't want to name. A smell too, earth and copper and the fading perfume of dead flowers. He passed something growing from a fissure in the wall, vines but soft and colorless, moving slowly toward his boot like blind fingers. He stepped around them, then paused. There was a sound now. Not loud, not near, just steady. A rhythm, deep beneath the stairwell. It didn't echo but it was there. A slow, wet thud. Again. Thud. Pause. Thud. It came from beneath, and it was beating, like a heart. Elias pressed forward. The stairway opened suddenly without warning. He emerged into a chamber. Not vast, more like a hollowed dome. The walls curved upward into a low arch, and the floor beneath his boots felt no longer like wood, but something smoother, like bone smoothed by water. He couldn't see the ceiling, couldn't see any source of light, but somehow the room glowed, dim, pale, as if remembered light had been pressed into the walls. And in the center of the chamber stood a figure. He almost didn't notice it at first. It didn't move. It blended perfectly with the wall behind it. But after a moment, after the haze of the strange air cleared from his eyes, he saw it. A woman. No, what had once been a woman. She stood tall, shoulders pulled back, arms limp at her sides. Her skin was the color of wax held too close to flame, almost translucent. Her hair was long, white, not from age but from absence. No eyes, just the hollows where they once had been. And yet she was looking at him. He knew it, felt it in his spine. Then slowly, achingly, she raised one hand. Not to threaten, not to beckon, but to offer. In her palm sat a key. It was ancient, bone-carved, curled in on itself in spirals too delicate to be made by human hands. It pulsed gently like the match had, like a thing that had been waiting to be found. Elias stepped forward. She did not move again. He reached slowly toward the key, aware that something about this moment was being measured. Judge, that there was a rule here, unspoken but immutable, and he was being watched for obedience. His hand hovered over hers. He waited. Nothing happened. He took the key. The moment his fingers curled around it, her hand dropped to her side. Her body relaxed, too much, like string cut from a puppet. Her head tilted sideways and then, without a sound, she melted. Not liquefied, not turned to ash. She simply lost form. The figure that had once been there now lay scattered as threads of fabric and a puddle of colorless wax on the bone-smooth floor. The smell of the chamber changed, dried petals now, thus forgotten morning. Elias stared down at the key. It was warm. It vibrated faintly like a hummingbird's wings. And from the far end of the chamber, beyond a threshold that had not been there before, a door appeared. No hinges, no frame. just a black rectangle cut into the stone-like wall. The key grew warmer in his palm. He stepped forward. He did not want to, but he did. The closer he came to the door, the more his ears rang. A soft tone. Not a scream. Not pressure. Just tone. Like the forest was trying to remember his name. The doorway towered over him. Beyond it, nothing. Not darkness. Absence. He lifted the key, unsure what it would do. The key floated from his fingers. Just a few inches. Then, with a faint chime that echoed inside his skull, it pressed forward into the air where a keyhole should be, and vanished. The doorway opened. Not inward. Not outward. It unfolded. Like skin peeling back from something that had never meant to be exposed. And beyond it, another forest. But not the one he had left. This one bled light. Elias stepped through. The door sealed behind him with a sigh. The first thing Elias noticed was the color. It wasn't the emerald green of a northern wood, nor the gray-black hue of the trail he'd walked before. This forest was red. Not crimson or blood red, but deep rust soaked into every tree trunk, every leaf, every patch of moss. A palette of old earth and old wounds. The canopy above pulsed with faint golden veins that lit the space like a sunset seen through a veil of smoke. The trees here were impossibly tall, straight and narrow like reeds in a swamp, but their bark peeled in long strips that hung like torn paper. Between their roots the ground moved. Not visibly. But when Elias stepped forward, the dirt gave slightly, like walking on something not entirely dead. The door behind him was gone. Where it had been, there was only another tree. Pale and bent, with a scar along its bark shaped like an eye. No opening. No frame. Only the sense that something had been closed. And would not open again. The air was dry now. The moisture of the previous stairwell and underground chamber had vanished, replaced by a warm breeze that carried with it the scent of iron and burnt pine. It clung to Elias's clothes. He walked, because he didn't know what else to do. The matchbox was still in his pocket, heavy for its size. He didn't take it out. Not yet. The last time had led him to a door he hadn't meant to find. Now he wasn't sure if this place existed beneath the earth, or beneath something deeper. The forest watched. Not metaphorically. He felt it in his skin. Every branch bent slightly toward him. Every leaf turned in his direction. Even the wind followed behind his shoulders. And far in the distance, beyond the bleeding canopy and the low, distant hum of wind, he heard them. Chimes. Soft. Faint. As if blown in from a place too far to see. They weren't wind chimes. They were bells. Ritual bells. Thin, brittle, struck slowly. And they were moving. Coming closer. He walked faster now. Not panicked. Just not slow. The path beneath him was not a trail in the conventional sense. It simply cleared for him. Vines unwound before his boots touched them. Branches lifted slightly to let him pass. No obstacle presented itself. And somehow that was worse. Because paths are made by choice. And this one was being made for him. After nearly 20 minutes, or maybe longer, time didn't move here in the same way. He came to a clearing. Circular. Perfect. At the center stood a structure. It looked like a shrine. A simple stone platform raised on 4 thick columns, each carved with patterns he didn't recognize. Spirals, moss, hands, over and over in different proportions. A 5th column lay broken at the base, shattered into wedges that had been neatly stacked. Inside the platform's circle sat a bowl. Massive, carved from black stone veined with something glowing faintly red. It rested on a pedestal of bone, real bone, thick and fused together, polished clean. The bowl was full. Elias approached slowly. The contents weren't water. It wasn't blood either. It was memory. He couldn't explain it, but that was the only word that fit. It shimmered like oil, but thicker. The surface reflected not light, but moments. As he drew near, he saw flickers in its surface. A cabin in the woods, a fire burning low, a child crying in the dark. None of them were his, yet he felt them, as if they were being pressed into his chest. He stepped away. And that's when he noticed the figures. Around the edge of the clearing, just beyond the pillars, stood 5 people. No, not people. They wore robes of faded cloth, almost indistinguishable from the trees. Their faces were hidden behind masks, wooden, carved with long noses and gaping mouths. None of them moved. They had not been there a moment ago. They stood in a perfect circle, evenly spaced. Elias's skin crawled. He turned to leave the way he came, but the path was gone. Not overgrown. Not hidden. Gone. The trees had closed ranks. The forest behind him was now solid wall, as if it had never parted to let him through. No passage, no gap. He turned back to the figures. They remained motionless. Then one of them lifted a hand. It held a bell. And slowly, with a movement that seemed to tremble through the air, the figure rang it. A soft, high chime. Another followed suit. Then another. All five. Each bell a different note. Together they formed a chord. Oh, melancholy. Like a funeral song sung for something that had never lived long enough to be mourned. The sound sank into the clearing. The bowl pulsed. And Elias felt his knees give slightly. The air thickened again, heavier than before. Then the masked figure closest to the shattered pillar stepped forward. It knelt beside the bowl, and, with delicate hands, dipped its fingers into the memory liquid. Then it wrote, not on the ground, not in the air, but on the surface of the bowl itself, tracing symbols with the memory-stained fingers. As it moved, the symbols glowed, each one burning briefly before fading into the stone. They weren't writing, not in any language he knew, but they felt ancient, familiar. Then the figure looked at him, its head tilted, and in a voice like roots growing through old floorboards it spoke. Do you remember your name? Elias opened his mouth, but nothing came out, not because he didn't know it, but because in that moment it had slipped. He felt it nearby, like a word on the tip of his tongue, but it wouldn't come. The figure stood again, stepped aside, and pointed at the bowl. The other four began to chant. Oh, wordless, a tone more than a language. The forest leaned closer, and Elias understood. He had to drink, not for sustenance, not for thirst, but because the forest required it. It was remembering him now, and to leave, to survive this, he had to become part of its memory. He stepped to the bowl, looked down. The surface rippled, and he saw a vision. A boy standing in a house with no roof, rain pouring through, a mother calling from a hallway that led nowhere, a lantern swinging alone in the dark. Then he leaned down and drank. The forest exhaled. The liquid slid down his throat like syrup, but not warm, not cold either. It had no temperature at all, just a strange, clinging weight, as if each drop hung in his mouth a moment longer than it should have before deciding to fall. Elias staggered backward as soon as it touched his gut, not because it burned, but because something inside him shifted. Not physically, not pain, but placement, as though his memories, his sense of self, had been slid to the side just slightly to make room for something else. A presence, a recording, a wound. Whatever it was, it pressed into the softest parts of him, old dreams, childhood fears, flashes of grief, and made itself at home. He dropped to one knee, gasping, not for breath but for anchor. The masked figures didn't move. The bells had fallen silent. The clearing had not changed, and yet it felt utterly different. The sky above, if it was a sky, now glowed with faint spirals of moving gold light. Not stars, not clouds, something older. Symbols etched into the fabric of the world itself, rotating in patterns too slow to follow. The trees trembled, not from wind, from anticipation. And Elias began to remember, but not his memories. The first was of fire. A ring of flames drawn around a cradle made of twine. Hands, many hands reaching inward, not to harm but to bind. A chant, spoken in a language he had never learned and yet understood perfectly. The child in the cradle, he could not see its face, was weeping, not from fear, not from pain, but because it knew it was being claimed. The second memory came fast behind it. A forest, this one but far younger, greener, unburned, full of songbirds and animals and laughter. There were people here, walking along paths now vanished, in robes of woven bark and paint made of crushed petals. They were happy, but only because they had not yet heard it. The third memory arrived like a whisper in his mouth. A well. A deep, dry well, carved into the roots of a hill that should not have had a mouth. Voices echoed from below, but there was nothing human at the bottom. Only the suggestion of form. A wrong shape, curled too tightly to move, waiting to be fed a name. And that's when Elias felt it. A gap in himself. A space where his name had been. It hadn't slipped away. It had been taken. Fed into something below. He stood up, heart pounding now. Not with panic, but recognition. This place was not a prison. Was not a dream. Was a record. A living archive of all the things the world was supposed to forget. And by drinking, Elias had signed his page. He turned back toward the masked figures. They were gone. The clearing was empty. Even the pillars had vanished. Only the bowl remained, now cracked clean down the center. Memory spilled slowly from the scene. The forest beyond had changed again. No longer red, now white. Pale trees, tall and bone-smooth, stood in perfect, unnatural symmetry. Each was the exact same distance from the next. Their branches curved upward, never touching. The forest was silent. Not even the sound of leaves brushing. As if air no longer moved here. And at the center of this new landscape, a path. This time a real one. Stone. Straight. And at its end, a doorway. Freestanding. What? Elias stepped forward. Each footfall on the stone path echoed faintly, finally an echo. The silence didn't like it. The sound cracked the stillness like a voice in a tomb. Halfway down the path, something stepped onto it ahead of him. A figure. Human. Wearing his face, but not his body. This version of Elias looked taller. Leaner. Eyes darker. Not bruised or bloodshot, but filled with knowing. And when it smiled, the mouth was wrong. Not because of teeth, because it looked like it had never stopped smiling. Elias stopped. The double took a step forward. Then another. And then, as if not walking at all but remembering how to appear, it was only feet away. Its eyes never blinked. And it spoke. We gave you the path. You gave us the key. Elias opened his mouth, but the other Elias raised a hand. And he felt it. His voice was no longer his. He could breathe, swallow, scream. But the words would not come. The double circled him now, steps soft. You drank what was not yours. Pause. Then almost gently. But it fits you, doesn't it? Elias turned to face it. The forest tilted, only slightly but enough to feel the world was watching again. The other him leaned forward. And in a softer voice. Would you like to remember the rest? Then it held out its hand. In its palm was something small. A ring. Black, carved from the same strange bone as the key. Inside the band, a name. Elias's name. He reached for it because something in him ached to know. Not to possess the ring, but to reclaim what had been taken. As his fingers closed around the ring, the other version of him whispered, You will no longer belong to yourself. Then it vanished. No wind. No sound. Just gone. The ring was in his hand now. And as soon as his skin touched the inner engraving, the letters burned into his palm. Not physically, not pain, but permanence. He wore the name now. But it was only part of who he had been. The rest was still buried. Somewhere beyond the door. Elias looked toward it. The door stood silent, unmoving. But behind it he felt it waiting. And in the hollow of his chest, something began to whisper again. Not fear. Not command. But memory. And memory had roots. Elias stood in front of the freestanding door, stone beneath his boots, ring tight around his finger, name burning faintly in his palm like a brand carved into thought. It didn't ache, not in the way pain usually did, but it glowed with a weight that grew heavier with every passing second, like it knew something he didn't. The door was black. Not painted. Not shadowed. Black in the way obsidian swallows light. It had no handle, no hinges. It was simply there, tall, unnaturally thin, framed by air, humming with a stillness so deep it bordered on sentience. There was no mistaking it now. It wasn't a barrier. It was an invitation. And it had been waiting for him. Elias circled it once, half expecting something to shift, to react, to open of its own volition. But it didn't. It just stood. At its base, etched into the stone path, were symbols. Familiar now. The same spirals and hollowed eyes he'd seen in the clearing, beneath the shrine, written by memory-soaked fingers. As he moved, the ring on his finger began to warm. Not heat, resonance. Each pulse in the metal vibrated through his bones like footsteps inside his own chest. He didn't think. Not in the traditional sense. He knew. Without understanding how, Elias raised his hand and pressed the ringed finger to the surface of the door. There was no sound, but there was motion. The black rippled outward from the point of contact, distorting like fabric soaked in oil. The ripples spread, folding back into themselves, pulling inward, until the door disappeared like water down a drain. Behind it, a hallway. Long, narrow. Made of something that shouldn't have held structure. Woven root and sinew and stone, fused into one seamless mass. The air was thick again. But it didn't smell like before. Now it smelled like him. Not his body. His history. He took a step forward. The floor was soft, quiet beneath his boots. It didn't echo. Nothing echoed here. He moved slowly. As he walked, the hallway pulsed faintly, like a throat that had learned to hold breath. The walls shimmered with patterns, faint, almost hidden in the folds of organic texture. Shapes, scenes, memories. He looked closer. The first was a woman's face, not carved but grown into the wall. Her eyes open, mouth parted in sleep or death. Her expression was peaceful. Almost. Something in her brow furrowed slightly, like she had died halfway through a terrible dream. Elias recognized her. He didn't know how, but he knew her. He reached out, fingers brushing the curve of her cheek, and a voice bloomed in his mind. Not a sound. A knowing. A word. Mother. He pulled his hand back like he'd touched a live wire. Took a step away. Further down the hall, more faces appeared. A man, older, eyes sunken, lips stitched shut with black thread. A child, genderless, skin smooth like porcelain, but cracked across the forehead as though dropped. A mirror framed in thorn. And in the reflection himself. Not as he was, but as he had been. 8 years old. Standing at the edge of a lake he did not remember visiting. A hand, his mother's, resting on his shoulder. Something moving in the water. He blinked. The mirror was gone. The hallway narrowed. The ceiling dropped. The space grew tighter, denser. The walls pressed in, covered now not in memories but in teeth. Small, uneven. Set into the roots like offerings, some of them gold, others split down the middle. They clicked faintly as he passed. Not random. Not rhythmic. Just aware. Elias didn't stop. He couldn't. The ring pushed him forward now, not literally but spiritually. Like something inside had been wound tight and was now unraveling. Pulling him toward the center. Toward the heart of it. The corridor widened again. And opened into a chamber. This one was vast. Circular again. Lit from below by a soft glow. Not fire. Not electricity. Something else. The floor was translucent. Beneath it shadows swam. Human-shaped. Moving in slow spirals as if dancing without rhythm. At the center of the chamber stood a dais. Upon it, a chair. Not carved. Grown. It looked like antlers had been twisted into shape. Long, branching, some still sharp, some dulled by age. Around its legs, roots coiled like snakes frozen mid-movement. Moss covered the base, pulsing faintly. The chair was empty, but not unoccupied. There was something in the air above it. A presence. Felt more than seen. Elias stepped into the chamber. Behind him, the hallway vanished. The walls closed like eyelids. He was alone. The ring vibrated. Then from the chair the air shivered. A shape began to form. Smoke at first. Rising not from the ground, but from the chair itself. Like memory turning to mist. It coalesced, vaguely human, limbs forming in long strokes, the head last. No face. Only voice. But not words. It sang. A melody without language. A lullaby hummed by a throat that had forgotten how to speak. Elias couldn't breathe. Not because of fear. Because the song was his. He had heard it before. Not recently. Not as an adult. As a child. One time. One night. In a house with no roof. Rain pouring through. A lantern swinging. And a voice from the dark, just before he fell asleep, whispering that he had been chosen. The shape moved toward him. And from it a hand reached out. Long, gentle. Covered in the same symbols carved into the shrine's bowl. Elias didn't resist. The hand touched his chest. Right over the burn where the name had been sealed. And then, sudden. Blinding. A pulse of remembering. It wasn't his name that had been taken. It was his role. He had been here before. Not in body. In lineage. He was part of the offering. A descendant of one who had fed the roots. His blood held echoes of the old songs. And now the forest wanted him back. Not as prey. As warden. The smoke around him tightened, circling, winding into his limbs. Not suffocating. Fusing. And in the final moments before his vision blurred and the ring melted into his skin, he heard a voice at last. Clear. Sharp. Older than language. Remember your shape. And everything went black. Elias dreamed. Or perhaps he didn't. What passed through his mind in that darkness was too tactile to be imagination. Too raw to be memory. It wasn't vision either. It was absorption. He wasn't watching these things happen. He was becoming them. Layer by layer. Bone over bone. History pouring through him like black water down a hollow tree. The first sensation was root. Not metaphor. Not ancestry. But literal root. Tangled through him. He felt his ribs stretch and shift, hollow spaces between them filled with something fibrous and living. His spine ached, bent slightly backward, not in pain but in adjustment. It was aligning with something larger. Something older. The second sensation was echo. Sounds filtering through the dark, not reaching his ears but his blood. The distant creaking of branches. Rain falling on leaves miles above him. The rustle of feet, bare feet, over soft loam, circling, whispering, watching. He was not alone. And the third was voice. Not a single voice. A chorus. One that hadn't spoken for centuries, murmuring just beneath the threshold of language. Back, they whispered. Return. Anchor. Split. Words like breath. Not commands. Reminders. And Elias remembered. Not all at once. Not in detail. But in intention. A life not lived but meant to be. A role not chosen but promised. His family had made an agreement, long before names were written down. The line of wardens. Not guardians. Not watchers. Translators. Those who walked between the murmurings of the dark and the silence of the waking world. Those who carried memories that refused to die. The ones who left no grave, because their bones never stopped whispering. And he had been lost. For years. Living a life that did not belong to him. Until the match. Until the path. Until the invitation. He woke. But not like waking from sleep. It was more like surfacing from beneath something. A layer. A skin. His eyes opened, and at first there was no light, only texture. He saw the world in veins, in temperature shifts, in the vibration of sound moving through bark. Then vision returned. Slowly. Softly. He was still in the circular chamber. The chair remained at the center. But now it was full. And he was no longer standing. He sat. The antlers of the throne curled behind him like a rib cage grown outward. The roots beneath his feet pulsed faintly with golden threads. Around the base of the chamber, the shadows beneath the translucent floor moved more quickly now, shapes swimming with purpose. His clothes were gone, replaced by a garment not stitched but grown, woven from bark, moss, and thin strands of gray hair. It clung to him not with weight but with familiarity, as though it had waited for him to wear it again. He lifted his hands. They were his, but not entirely. Fingers slightly longer, nails darker. Not dirt but pigment. The ring was gone, because it was no longer separate. It had become part of his hand, a black spiral circling his middle knuckle, carved into the skin but not raised. A permanent seal. And the name? It had returned, but not as it was. Elias remembered now, he had never only been Elias. That had been the surface name, the walking name, the name for markets and contracts and introductions. But his undername, the one passed through the forest, through the mothers who bled beneath lantern light, was different. A name not spoken, only felt, like rain soaking into soil. A presence, a shape. And now he carried it fully. The chamber breathed with him. The forest above seemed to draw closer, though he was still deep beneath it. And then came the final test. The walls trembled. From the far end of the chamber, a new passage opened. No sound, just roots splitting like lips. A corridor, narrow and black, spiraled down into darker soil. And from it came footsteps. Slow, steady, familiar. A man emerged, middle-aged, beard streaked with white, eyes exhausted, clothes torn from travel. He held a lantern, one Elias recognized. The same one from the matchbox from the shrine. The man didn't speak at first. He stepped fully into the chamber, looked at Elias, and fell to his knees, hands to the ground, head bowed. "Forgive me," he whispered. Elias didn't answer, couldn't yet. The man looked up. "You were taken. I let them forget. But you came back. You found the path." Elias stared. I was your father," the man said, voice breaking. "Before they hid it. Before the forest made me forget. They took it all. Made me think you died. But I never stopped looking." He held up the lantern. "I followed your flame." The chamber grew quiet. Even the shadows beneath the floor stopped moving. Elias stood, not rushed, not towering, just steady. He stepped off the throne. The roots receded from his feet like obedient vines. He walked to the man, knelt, took the lantern, held it between them. The flame inside danced, not yellow, not orange. Green, alive. A new light, a new fire. He placed the lantern at the man's chest. The man wept. Elias placed a hand on his shoulder. And for the first time in generations, the forest spoke aloud. Through him. In a voice that rolled like thunder soaked in whisper. "The path has returned. But not all who walk it may leave." The man nodded. He understood. His journey was done. He was a messenger. And Elias? Elias was becoming the new warden. Of memory. Of shape. Of the forest that never forgot. The man who had once been Elias's father stayed kneeling long after Elias had risen again. Not out of fear. Not even reverence. He remained there because something in him had shifted, unspooled in the presence of a truth that had outlived his memories. He did not weep anymore. He only breathed, quietly, with understanding. Elias left him there. He carried the green-flamed lantern in one hand as he moved from the chamber, back through the narrow corridor where roots had unsealed a new path. They bent for him now, not dramatically, not in supplication, but in subtle, almost shy gestures, like shy creatures acknowledging their kin. He passed again through the hallway of faces, but they were different now. Where once the walls had grown features half remembered and half known, now they watched. Open eyes blinked slowly from the bark, their gaze soft but alert. He recognized them, not from memory, from blood, lineage, faces of past wardens, ancestors who had carried names deeper than language. Their presence was not hostile, not even mournful. They pulsed in the walls like the quiet presence of a fire that would never go out. Elias stopped at one. A woman with long black hair, her skin not waxy like before, but vibrant in the strange half-light. Her eyes were amber, alive. She smiled. He did not smile back. Not because he didn't want to, because the warden did not perform emotion. He carried it. He moved on. The forest was still growing around him. He emerged from the corridor into another part of the subterranean complex, one he hadn't seen before. This wasn't a shrine. This was a sanctum. High walls made of what looked like petrified timber reached up into total blackness. Their surface was covered in vines that glowed with faint bioluminescence, thousands of pinpricks like stars captured in thread. And in the center of the sanctum, a table. No, not a table. A map. Circular. Massive. Embedded directly into the floor. He approached. It was carved, not into wood, not into stone, but something that seemed to be made of coiled memory. The surface changed when you looked at it. At first it appeared to be topography, hills, ridges, river systems. Then it blinked and it was movement. Shadowed figures, trails lit with fire, circles of people gathered around silent flames. And then it pulsed once and became names. Spoken names. Elias heard them in his chest, not in his ears. 1,000 names whispered beneath the surface. Some old, some newer, some recent. One whispered up sharply, sharper than the rest. A woman's voice. Maeve. Elias narrowed his eyes. He didn't know her. Not directly. But her name burned like a freshly struck match. No, out of place. The forest had marked her. Not because she was part of it, but because she had entered, uninvited, still walking, still breathing, but wrong. He reached out and let his fingertips touch the map. The whisper changed. Now it showed her. Not a full image, a silhouette, flickering between forms, at times human, at times something distorted. Her footsteps had crossed into the northern wood. She had lit a fire there, not for warmth, for summoning. Elias watched, and knew she had found a lantern, not one of his. Not one the forest had given, but one buried. He turned away from the map and strode through the sanctum. Another passage opened for him, roots splitting along the floor and revealing a path paved in fragments of old bones, carved femurs and worn knuckles, old jawbones lined up like cobblestones. As he walked, the lantern in his hand burned brighter. Not harsh, just clearer, like it knew a purpose had been found. The path led up now. For the first time since his descent, Elias felt inclined beneath his boots. And soon the air changed again. Colder, damp, then fresher. Not entirely free of the forest's breath, but laced with it, sweet decay, old bark, the distant memory of wildflowers that hadn't bloomed in 100 years. He reached a door. This one was made of old wood bound in bark and blood-stained twine. No handle, just a symbol carved into the center. A spiral within a spiral with a dot at its center. He touched the dot. The door opened. He stepped through and found sky, night sky, low clouds, black and rumbling with slow flashes of heatless lightning. He stood in a glade ringed with pale birch trees. No birds, no insects. The only sound was the sigh of the wind shifting through dead grass. He had returned to the surface, but not the surface he had left. This was deeper. A place between layers of the forest's skin. A halfway place. And across the glade, maybe 100 yards away. A fire. Small. Flickering. Someone was there. The girl. She sat cross-legged, unaware. Or pretending to be. She was humming to herself, a quiet, broken little tune. It was off-key. Worse, it was familiar. One of the old songs. The kind you weren't supposed to find on your own. Elias did not call to her. He didn't need to. She turned anyway, her eyes locked with his, and she smiled. Not in fear, not in surprise, in recognition. "You're late," she said softly, then stood, and in her hands, a lantern, but the flame was blue. The cold air bit into Elias's skin as he stepped closer to the flickering fire. The glow of Maeve's blue flame illuminated her face with an eerie, unnatural light, pale and sharp, like moonlight slicing through thin mist. Her eyes held a gleam that was both inviting and distant, like a star just out of reach. "You're late," she said again, voice soft but edged with something unreadable. It wasn't accusation or impatience. It was expectation. Elias studied her carefully. She was no longer the shadow flickering on the map. Here she was flesh and bone, solid and breathing. Yet the lantern she held did not seem to belong to this world. The blue flame danced like a living thing, whispering secrets only she could hear. "I followed the path the forest gave me," Elias said quietly, keeping the green lantern steady in his hand. Its glow pulsed faintly in response to Maeve's blue flame, as if recognizing a challenge. Maeve smiled again, slower this time, lips curving with a touch of irony. "The forest's gifts are never simple. You drink from the memory bowl, carry the ring, and rise from the depths, but you still don't understand." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" She knelt beside the fire and traced a finger through the glowing embers, which twined and coiled like smoke but held shape. "This flame," she said, lifting the lantern closer, "is not from the forest. It's the fire of those who resist it." Her gaze locked onto his. "We're on different sides, Elias. I'm not here to welcome you. I'm here to change the rules." A cold shiver raced down Elias's spine, but his voice was calm. "What? Why summon the forest's power if you don't believe in it?" Maeve's eyes darkened briefly, then softened, almost mournful. "Because I don't want to be swallowed. I want to control what devours us." She stood, the fire's glow flickering against the pale birch trees that surrounded them like silent sentinels. "The forest remembers everything, but it forgets that it needs us as much as we need it. The power we wield, it's a dance of give and take, not a blind surrender." Elias considered her words carefully. Her flame was different, but the fear in her voice was real. The forest had never been kind to those who sought to bend it to their will. Still, the green lantern in his hand pulsed brighter, and the air around them seemed to hum with tension, like two forces drawing closer, ready to clash or unite. "Tell me, Maeve," Elias said, stepping forward into the circle of light, "what price did you pay to carry that flame?" Maeve's smile faded, replaced by a hard edge. "I lost myself. Pieces of who I was dissolved into the blue fire. It sings to my blood now, sometimes louder than my own heartbeat. But it gave me knowledge and the strength to walk the forest's edge without being claimed." She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small, twisted talisman carved from bone, similar to the ring Elias wore, but jagged and rough. "I'm here to find others like me. To warn you, the forest is waking. It's hungry for more than memories. It wants souls." Elias swallowed, feeling the weight of his new role settle heavier on his shoulders. The forest had claimed him, reshaped him, but this was a new threat. Something born not from the roots or shadows but from human defiance. He looked down at his green lantern, its light steady and warm. "Then we have a choice. To fight or to become what the forest needs us to be." Maeve's eyes gleamed with something fierce, almost desperate. "Or to burn the forest down from within." The wind stirred through the birches, carrying whispers that only they could hear. The night seemed to hold its breath. Elias and Maeve stood in silence, two bearers of fire, one green, one blue, facing the uncertain darkness together. The night around the glade held its breath, the birch trees silent witnesses to the fragile moment between Elias and Maeve. The tension between them was thick enough to taste, a mix of mistrust, curiosity, and something deeper, a longing to understand what they had both become in the shadow of the forest. Maeve shifted the blue flame in her lantern, causing it to ripple like a living thing. "You don't know what you're up against," she said, voice low but steady. "The forest is not just memory and roots. It's hunger, and it's learning. It adapts." Elias kept his gaze fixed on her, the green light from his lantern steady and warm in his hand. "And you think your fire can control it? Bend it to your will without being consumed?" She smiled, a sharp, bitter smile. "No, but I can fight back. I can keep it at bay longer than most." The glow from their lanterns cast long, intertwining shadows that flickered across the birch trunks, the two flames merging momentarily before pulling apart again. The forest around them seemed to lean in, listening. Elias took a slow breath, feeling the ancient power flowing through his veins. "Then we need to learn from each other. Your flame and mine, both born from the forest but shaped by different truths. Together, maybe we can understand the hunger before it's too late. Maeve regarded him, eyes searching, measuring. The blue flame danced higher, then settled as if deciding. Fine, she said at last, but on one condition. He nodded. Name it. She took a step closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. No secrets. Between us. The forest thrives on hidden things. If we're going to survive, we need trust. Elias considered. Trust was a rare commodity in the shadows they walked, but the alternative was loneliness, and worse, destruction. I agree. She extended her hand, palm open, revealing the jagged talisman carved from bone. Elias placed his hand over hers, the black spiral of the ring pressing against the rough edges of the talisman. A pulse of energy surged between them, warm and cold, light and dark, memory and resistance. The air crackled. The pact was sealed. Suddenly, the forest around them stirred. The wind whispered through the birch trees like a chorus of voices, urgent, warning. From the edge of the glade, shadows began to move. Shapes emerged, twisted, pale figures that seemed woven from the roots and soil, their eyes glowing faintly red. The hunger was coming. Elias tightened his grip on the green lantern, feeling the deep-rooted power within. Maeve lifted the blue flame higher, its light cutting through the darkness like a blade. Side by side, two bearers of fire stepped forward into the encroaching shadows. The forest was awakening, and so were they. The shadows that slithered from the edge of the birch glade were not human, yet they mimicked humanity with grotesque imitation. They moved like marionettes with tangled strings of root and decay, their limbs elongated and twisted in unnatural angles. Their faces, if they could be called that, were masks of dark soil cracked open, revealing flickering red embers like the dying core of a fire. Elias and Maeve stood shoulder to shoulder, their lanterns raised, green and blue flames intertwining in the night air. The forest around them had fallen into a heavy silence, as if the trees themselves held their breath for what was to come. The figures advanced with slow, deliberate steps, their movements accompanied by a faint crunch of dry leaves and brittle twigs underfoot. Maeve whispered, voice steady but filled with urgency, "These are the hunger. They are what the forest sheds when it is angry or threatened. Not just lost souls, but fragments of the forest's memory turned rancid and violent." Elias nodded, the green flame in his hand pulsing stronger, spreading a warm radiance that pushed back the darkness. "They are not mindless," he said. "They learn, adapt. They remember pain and use it." One of the creatures halted a few feet from them and let out a rasping breath that sounded like wind through dead leaves. Its eyes flared brighter. It reached forward with a hand that was a gnarled mass of wood and thorn. The air thickened. The hunger were not merely attacking. They were trying to claim. Elias felt the familiar tug of the forest's will, the ancient call to surrender, to become part of its endless cycle. But this was different. This was rage twisted into hunger. Maeve stepped forward, raising her blue lantern. The flame flared suddenly, sharp and biting, and a wave of cold swept out in a ripple that cracked the air. The creature recoiled, its ember eyes flickering. But there was no retreat. The hunger surged forward, claws ripping through the underbrush, shrieking with voices like cracked branches snapping in a storm. Elias reached deep, summoning the warden's power he had only just begun to understand. The green flame responded, glowing brighter, and tendrils of light wove from the lantern, snaking outward like living vines. The vines wrapped around the nearest hunger, binding it tight. But the creature howled, a sound like 1,000 broken screams, and shattered the bonds with raw force. Maeve and Elias exchanged a glance, a wordless agreement. They needed to fight together. Maeve stepped into the clearing, swirling the blue flame in a wide arc. The fire sang, an eerie, haunting melody that pierced the shrieks and seemed to cut through the very essence of the hunger. Elias joined, sending waves of warm green light to meet her cold blue. Their flames clashed and merged, creating a swirling vortex of energy that pulsed with ancient song. The hunger faltered, backs arching and bodies twitching as the energy consumed them, burning away the corruption without destroying the raw matter beneath. But then the forest responded. The trees around the glade groaned as their bark shifted, revealing faces, old wardens bound to the forest's will, eyes glowing faintly like embers. They had awakened. From the shadows between the trees, more figures emerged. Not hunger. Not wardens, but something in between. Lost souls twisted by the forest, bound to serve its hunger. Maeve's blue flame flickered wildly. Elias felt a surge of power and fear. The forest was more than memory, more than hunger. It was alive. and it was watching. As the battle raged, Elias understood this fight was not merely for survival, it was for the very soul of the forest and for his own. He tightened his grip on the lanterns. This was only the beginning. The battle's echoes faded into a heavy silence that draped over the glade like a thick fog. The hunger had been pushed back, broken and scattered, but not destroyed. Their ragged cries dissolved into the wind, haunting reminders that the forest's wrath was far from spent. Elias and Maeve stood amid the fallen, their lanterns dimming, flickering with exhaustion as if the fires themselves needed breath after the storm. Their bodies were bruised, minds buzzing with the weight of what had just passed. But questions lingered, sharper than any wound. Who, or what, had birthed the hunger? And why did the forest feed them fragments of itself, twisted into rage? Maeve knelt beside a broken root, tracing a pattern carved deep into the wood, faint but unmistakable. The spiral within a spiral, the symbol Elias had seen on the hidden door. "It's a mark of binding," she said slowly. "A seal placed long ago to contain something dangerous." But what? Elias crouched beside her, fingertips brushing the bark. Suddenly, a pulse of memory flickered in his mind, not his own but ancient and raw. He saw visions. Not clear images but sensations. A forest untouched by time, lush and vibrant, where the ancestors of the wardens walked in harmony with the wild. A pact had been made, between human and forest spirit, sealed with blood and fire. But then came betrayal. A corruption. A wound in the roots that spread like poison. The forest fought back, fragmenting its own essence into the hunger, creatures meant to consume the corruption before it could spread. But the hunger were flawed, wild and restless, their hunger endless. Maeve looked up, eyes fierce with realization. They are not just corrupted spirits. They are curses born from the forest's attempt to heal itself. Elias nodded, the weight of responsibility settling deeper into his bones. And if the hunger cannot be stopped, the forest will devour everything. Their gazes met, a silent vow passing between them. Together they would dive deeper. They would unearth the ancient wounds buried beneath roots and memory. The forest's darkest secrets waited below, and they would face them. The cold dawn had not yet broken when Elias and Maeve stood at the edge of the glade, their lanterns now dimmed but still alive with the lingering power of the previous night's battle. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, the ancient birches standing like silent sentinels guarding secrets far older than either of them could imagine. Maeve's gaze flicked toward the shadowed path winding into the depths beneath the forest floor, the subterranean sanctum Elias had glimpsed before. It was a place where roots intertwined with stone, where memory and flesh coalesced into something almost sacred and almost dangerous. "We have to go back," Elias said, voice steady but low. "The roots hold more than just wounds, they hold answers." Maeve nodded, tightening the grip on the blue flame. "The hunger's origin lies beneath, and I don't think they're finished with us." Their footsteps crunched softly over the underbrush as they made their way to the hidden entrance. The air grew cooler, heavier with the scent of earth and something older, decay wrapped in the promise of renewal. At the entrance, the roots pulsed gently as if recognizing Elias's presence. With a quiet murmur, the massive tangle shifted, revealing the narrow corridor once more, the passage that had swallowed him into the forest's embrace. Elias stepped forward, lanterns illuminating the dark, their flames casting long, wavering shadows on the woven walls of root and stone. As they descended, the air thickened with silence, but beneath it, a faint hum resonated, a heartbeat older than the trees themselves. The hallway opened into a vast cavern, vast and cathedral-like, lined with towering pillars of root twisting skyward into unseen heights. The walls were alive, veins of green and gold pulsing softly, glowing with an inner light. At the cavern's center lay an altar, carved not from stone but from a single massive root that seemed to breathe with its own slow rhythm. Maeve approached, her blue flame casting eerie patterns on the altar's surface. "This is the heart," she whispered. "The forest soul." Elias reached out, fingertips brushing the pulsing wood. Images flooded his mind, visions of ancient ceremonies, of wardens and forest spirits entwined in rituals of binding and sacrifice. Faces blurred into one another, voices rising in haunting song. Then, abruptly, the vision shifted. Darkness. A shadow slipping through roots, poisoning the earth. A figure cloaked in shadow, wielding a blade forged from bone and sorrow. A betrayal that fractured the pact and birthed the hunger. Elias staggered back, gasping for breath. Maeve steadied him. "The forest was not always our enemy," she said softly. "It was hurt, wounded by those who sought to control it." He looked into the depths of the altar's heart and saw movement, something lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be awakened or to be silenced forever. The hunger were not just mindless monsters. They were a symptom, a warning, a curse that could consume them all. "We have to find the source," Elias said, determination hardening his voice. "Before the hunger spreads beyond the forest. Before it devours everything." Maeve nodded, raising her lantern. "Then let's descend deeper, into the roots of memory and shadow." Together they stepped beyond the altar, into the darkness beneath the forest's heart. Elias and Maeve stepped through the shadowed passage beyond the altar, the air thick and cool as if they were sinking deeper into the very veins of the earth. The roots here were dense, their gnarled surfaces slick with moisture, and they wound through the cavern walls in labyrinthine tangles that seemed to pulse faintly with unseen life. Every breath they took carried the scent of wet earth and ancient decay, but beneath it was something sweeter, a trace of the forest's slow heartbeat. Maeve's blue flame flickered nervously in the stillness, casting strange, dancing shadows on the twisting walls. Elias's green light pulsed softly, steady and warm, a tether to the living power that hummed beneath their feet. "This place is older than anything above ground," Maeve murmured, voice echoing slightly. "The roots remember everything. Every wound, every betrayal. It's as if the forest's history is carved into these walls." They walked slowly, the labyrinth folding around them like a living thing. The paths split and merged, twisting unpredictably, and the roots seemed to close in whenever they hesitated. At times, faint whispers filled the air, soft murmurs that teased the edge of hearing, voices that were almost words. Suddenly, Elias stopped. The green light pulsed faster, almost like a heartbeat racing. "There," he said, pointing to a narrow crevice between two massive roots. Maeve moved closer, her blue flame reaching toward the gap. The air felt charged, electric with anticipation. They squeezed through the narrow opening, limbs brushing damp bark and cold stone, and emerged into a vast chamber deep beneath the surface. The cavern was immense, its ceiling lost in darkness far above. At the center was a pool of black water, still and glassy like a mirror, reflecting the faint glimmers of light from the roots overhead. Elias approached the edge cautiously, the surface of the water rippling despite the absence of wind. As he peered into the depths, images began to swirl beneath the surface, visions not his own, memories of the forest's ancient past. He saw a great tree, its roots spreading wide and deep, a towering guardian of life itself. Around it gathered figures, wardens and spirits in harmony, sharing song and story, binding their fates together in sacred trust. Then the vision twisted. A shadow tore through the scene, a dark figure wielding a blade, slicing into the tree's trunk. The great guardian bled sap like blood, its leaves withering and falling. The shadow spread, infecting the roots, twisting them into snarls of hunger and rage. The water's surface shimmered and then cleared. Maeve reached his side, her voice barely above a whisper. The betrayal was the beginning of the hunger. The forest tried to heal itself, but the wound festered. Elias touched the water, and the images shifted, now showing a figure, hooded and silent, carrying a lantern similar to theirs. This figure moved through the dark roots, seeking something buried deep within the earth. "Who is that?" Elias asked. Maeve shook her head. "A warden from long ago, perhaps the last who tried to seal the forest's curse." The chamber trembled suddenly, the roots thrumming with unrest. The hunger were near. "We don't have much time," Elias said, stepping back from the pool. "We need to find that source before the hunger breaks free again." Maeve nodded, eyes fierce. "And if the last warden failed, what hope do we have?" Elias raised his green lantern, its light brightening with resolve. "We carry more than their failures. We carry their memories, their strength." Together, they turned away from the pool, deeper into the labyrinth's winding roots, where the forest's darkest secrets waited to be uncovered. The winding labyrinth of roots seemed endless, a tangled maze that challenged every step Elias and Maeve took. The faint glow of their lanterns revealed twisted carvings and symbols etched into the bark, messages left by those who had come before, warnings and prayers entwined with the wood like veins. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, and somewhere deep beneath, the pulse of the forest's heart echoed like a distant drum. Maeve moved with a practiced grace, her blue flame illuminating their path as Elias kept pace beside her, feeling the weight of history pressing down upon them. Every turn they took, every narrow passage they squeezed through, brought them closer to something old and terrible, a secret the forest had tried to bury for centuries. As they advanced, faint footsteps echoed softly ahead, rhythmic and deliberate as though someone, or something, was waiting for them deeper within the roots. "Do you hear that?" Maeve whispered, her eyes narrowing. Elias nodded, tightening his grip on his lantern. "We're not alone." They moved cautiously, every sense alert. The roots around them pulsed faintly, responding to their presence, sometimes closing in, sometimes parting like silent guides. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a chamber unlike the others, vast and cavernous, lined with jagged stone and ancient wood. At its center stood a figure cloaked in shadow, back turned toward them, shoulders tense and rigid. The figure's footsteps ceased, and a low hum filled the chamber, vibrating through the air like a chant. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face both familiar and strange. A woman, her eyes glowing faintly with the same green light Elias carried, but tinged with something darker. "Who are you?" Elias asked, voice steady but wary. The woman smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I am Leora, the last of the old wardens." Maeve's blue flame flickered as if in recognition. "We thought you were lost." Leora's gaze drifted to the pool of black water at the chamber's edge. "I was bound by the forest's curse, trapped between memory and shadow." She stepped forward, voice soft but urgent. "The hunger is spreading because the curse is not just a wound, it's a chain. And only by breaking the chain can the forest be healed." Elias felt the weight of her words settle around him. "How do we break it?" Leora reached into her cloak and pulled out a fragment of bone, weathered and carved with the same spiral symbol they had seen throughout the labyrinth. "This is the key. A shard of the original blade that wounded the forest. But to use it, we must confront the source of the curse." She gestured toward a narrow passage shrouded in darkness, where the roots writhed like living serpents. "We'll need to face what lies beyond," she said. "The forest's deepest secret, and the heart of the hunger itself." Elias and Maeve exchanged glances, fear, determination, and a glimmer of hope mingling in their eyes. Together, they stepped into the darkness, the labyrinth closing behind them as the forest whispered its ancient song, one of loss, betrayal, and the faintest promise of redemption. The darkness swallowed them as Elias, Maeve, and Leora stepped into the narrow passage, the walls alive with writhing roots that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat all their own. The air was thick, damp, and heavy, carrying with it the scent of ancient earth and something darker, something that gnawed at the edges of their courage. Maeve's blue flame flickered uncertainly, struggling against the oppressive shadows. Elias's green lantern pulsed steadily, a beacon in the suffocating gloom. Leora led the way, her steps sure despite the stifling atmosphere. As they descended deeper into the labyrinth, Leora began to speak, her voice low and filled with a haunted weight. "I was once like you, full of hope, belief in the warden's sacred duty to bind the forest spirit and protect the world above. But the betrayal came swiftly and without mercy." She paused, her eyes fixed on the twisting roots ahead. "The blade that wounded the great tree was forged by our own kin, driven by greed and fear. They believed control meant safety, but they unleashed a curse that poisoned everything." Elias listened intently, the images from the pool flashing through his mind, the great tree bleeding, the shadowed figure wielding the blade. Leora continued, voice thickening with sorrow. "When the curse took hold, the forest fought back, not with reason but with pain. It shattered the balance and birthed the hunger. I tried to stop it, to seal the wound. But the forest's rage trapped me, binding my soul to these roots." She lifted the bone shard, its spiral etchings glowing faintly. "This is part of the blade, the key to breaking the chain. But using it means more than cutting through roots, it demands a sacrifice." Elias's heart tightened. "What kind of sacrifice?" Leora's gaze met his, steady and unflinching. "One of memory and self. To heal the forest, the one who wields the shard must give up the past, everything that defines them. Their name, their history, their very essence. Only then can the curse be undone." Maeve's blue flame flared brighter, casting sharp shadows on the roots. "And if they refuse?" "The forest consumes," Leora said grimly. "It erases, leaves only hunger and shadow." The weight of her words settled heavily on Elias. He glanced at Maeve, whose fierce eyes reflected the turmoil within. They moved forward again, the passage narrowing until they reached a cavern bathed in an eerie, greenish light, the heart of the labyrinth. At its center stood a twisted tree, blackened and broken, its roots tangled in a web of dark energy that pulsed with malevolent life. The hunger gathered around it, their ember eyes glowing with hunger and hate. Elias stepped forward, green lantern raised. "This is where it ends." Maeve lifted her blue flame, its cold fire cutting through the darkness. Leora held the bone shard aloft, the spiral gleaming with ancient power. Together they faced the heart of the curse, the final test. Elias knew the choice before him: to sacrifice the self he knew and sever the curse forever, or risk losing everything to the forest's ravenous hunger. The cavern breathed around them, thick with the pulse of corrupted life. Roots, twisted and blackened, writhed like serpents coiled around the ancient heart of the forest. At the center, the broken tree stood like a wounded giant, its branches shattered, its bark scarred with deep gashes that bled dark sap into the earth. The hunger circled like vultures, eyes glowing with insatiable fire, ready to devour the soul of the forest, and anyone who dared to defy it. Elias stood at the threshold, his green lantern steady but his heart pounding. The weight of Leora's words pressed on him: the sacrifice, the erasure of self, the surrender to the unknown. His fingers curled tightly around the bone shard, its cold spiral etched into his skin as if demanding blood. Maeve's blue flame flickered beside him, a sharp contrast, icy and defiant, yet trembling with uncertainty. Leora stepped forward, her voice steady but heavy. The curse is ancient, bound to the forest's pain and to our own. To sever it, one must become the forest's memory and lose themselves. This is no easy path. Elias swallowed, the air thick with silence except for the soft hum of the roots. He looked at Maeve, then at Leora, the two faces reflecting the burden and hope he carried. The hunger closed in, their whispers crawling beneath his skin, promising oblivion or power, whichever he would choose. Time slowed. Elias raised the bone shard, feeling the cold bite of its edges, and pressed it to the wounded trunk. The forest seemed to shudder in response. A surge of pain rippled through him, not just physical but deep in his bones. Memories unraveling, identity slipping like sand through fingers. His name, his past, his very self blurred. He gasped but held firm. The green light from his lantern grew, radiating outwards in waves, weaving with Maeve's blue fire, wrapping the cavern in a tapestry of flame and shadow. The hunger screamed, their forms unraveling into shards of darkness, swallowed by the growing light. The roots pulsed violently, twisting and writhing as if struggling against the healing force. Elias felt himself fading, losing pieces of who he was, names, faces, memories, dissolving into the light. But amid the sacrifice, a new presence stirred within him. Not fear, not loss, but a deep, ancient connection. He was becoming more than himself, a part of the forest's enduring spirit. Maeve reached out, her blue flame steady, anchoring him. "Hold on," she whispered. Leora's voice echoed like a prayer. "Remember, even in sacrifice there is strength." The roots shuddered one last time before stilling, the dark curse severed at its source. The cavern filled with soft light, warm and alive. Elias fell to his knees, lanterns dimming but still glowing faintly. He was changed. The forest had claimed him. But he was no longer lost. Maeve knelt beside him, eyes shining with relief and sorrow. "We did it," she breathed. Leora smiled faintly, her form flickering like a candle about to be extinguished. "You are the new warden, not just of memory but of hope." The hunger were no more. For now. But the forest whispered still, ancient and alive, watching the new flame that burned within Elias. The cavern was bathed in a soft golden light, a stark contrast to the oppressive shadows that had ruled the labyrinth for so long. Elias knelt on the cold earth, the remnants of the curse dissolving like mist around him. His breath was ragged, the weight of sacrifice pressing deep within his bones, yet there was a calm settling over him, a quiet hum that echoed beneath his skin, as if the forest's heartbeat now beat in time with his own. Maeve sat beside him, her blue flame now steady and gentle, illuminating the lines of exhaustion and relief etched across her face. Leora's form shimmered faintly, fragile as a candle's final flicker. "You are not just Elias anymore," Leora said softly, voice wavering. "You are the warden, the living memory of this forest. The green flame you carry is not just light, it is life itself, born from sacrifice and hope." Elias closed his eyes, feeling the transformation ripple through him. Memories were shifting, no longer just his own, but those of countless wardens before him, entwined in a vast web of existence. Their voices whispered in the quiet corners of his mind, warnings, wisdom, lullabies. The forest's ancient spirit had not consumed him, it had made him whole. But with this newfound strength came a burden heavier than any before. "The hunger was only the beginning," Leora continued. "The forest still holds darker secrets, shadows deeper than even we can fathom. As warden, your path will not be easy. The balance you maintain is fragile, and many forces seek to unmake it." Maeve's eyes glimmered with determination. "We'll face it together. You, me, and what remains of the old wardens." Elias looked at the two women who had become his unlikely allies, their sacrifices as real as his own. A slow smile spread across his lips, tempered by the gravity of what lay ahead. "The forest is alive," Elias said finally, voice steady and clear. "And so are we. We will protect it, and each other, no matter the cost." Outside the cavern, the roots began to pulse with renewed vigor. The earth itself seemed to breathe a quiet sigh of relief, the curse lifted, the hunger stilled, for now. But somewhere, deep within the shadows beyond the forest's edge, a new presence stirred. Watching, waiting. The story was far from over. The forest was quiet, but the silence was not peace. It was the stillness that comes before a storm, heavy with promise and threat. Elias stood at the mouth of the cavern, the green flame in his lantern casting soft light across the gnarled roots and damp earth. Around him, the trees swayed gently, their leaves whispering secrets only the wind could understand. Maeve and Leora stood beside him, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of their own fires. The weight of the curse lifted, but the burden of vigilance had just begun. Elias felt it in his bones, the forest's pulse, the endless rhythm of life and decay, and beneath it all, the lingering echo of something darker yet to come. Leora spoke first, her voice steady despite her fading form. "The hunger was a symptom, not the disease. There is a deeper rot in the soil, a shadow cast long before the blade struck the great tree." Maeve's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? What lies beneath the roots?" "The forest's oldest secret," Leora said, turning her gaze toward the horizon. "An ancient presence older than the wardens themselves. A darkness that feeds on fear, corruption, and forgotten sins." Elias felt a chill creep along his spine. The green flame pulsed faster, responding to the warning. "We have only scratched the surface," he said quietly. "If this presence awakens fully, it could consume everything." Maeve clenched her fists, blue flame flickering fiercely. "Then we'll be ready. We have to be." As dawn broke, light spilled through the canopy in golden shafts, painting the forest floor with dappled patterns of hope and shadow. The air was thick with the scent of moss and rain, alive with the hum of insects and distant bird calls. Life returned, fragile but persistent. Yet Elias knew that beneath this veneer of calm, the forest watched and waited. In the days that followed, Elias trained to harness the new power within him. The green flame was no longer just a tool, it was a part of him, a living bond with the ancient forest. With Maeve's guidance, he learned to listen to the subtle shifts in the wind, to read the language of leaves, and to call upon the latent strength hidden in the roots beneath his feet. But every night, when the campfire flickered and the rain began to fall, the shadows would lengthen, whispering secrets he wasn't sure he was ready to hear. One evening, as the forest grew thick with mist and the rain drummed softly on leaves, a figure appeared at the edge of their camp. Cloaked and silent, the stranger's eyes glowed faintly with a light neither green nor blue. Elias felt the forest pulse with recognition and warning. This was no ordinary traveler. The story was unfolding, threads weaving tighter, pulling them all deeper into the mystery that was the murmuring dark. The rain softened to a gentle patter, drumming rhythmically on the canopy overhead as Elias and Maeve sat by the dwindling campfire. The scent of wet earth and pine filled the air, mixing with the faint smoke curling upward. Around them, the forest breathed quietly, a living, watching presence. And Elias felt the familiar tug of the green flame pulsing softly at his side, a reminder of the pact forged in sacrifice and memory. Suddenly, movement flickered at the edge of the clearing. Elias's breath caught as a figure emerged from the mist, a cloaked traveler whose presence seemed to ripple through the very air. The stranger's face was shadowed beneath a hood, but their eyes glimmered with an unnatural light, neither green like Elias's lantern nor blue like Maeve's flame, but something altogether different. A faint, cold silver glow, sharp and unsettling. Maeve rose slowly, her blue flame flaring in caution. "Who are you?" she asked, voice steady but edged with suspicion. The stranger's voice was low, almost a whisper, yet it carried a resonance that commanded attention. "I am called Silas. I have walked these woods longer than most remember. I have watched the forest's secrets, and I come with a warning." Elias's heart thrummed. The forest hummed too, a deep, vibrating pulse that prickled the skin. "Warning?" Elias asked. "About what?" Silas stepped forward, the mist curling around him like a cloak. "The curse you shattered was only one of many chains binding the darkness beneath. It is awakening, growing restless. The forest's hunger was but a symptom of a deeper rot, a shadow that threatens not just these woods, but all who dwell beyond." Maeve's gaze narrowed. "And why come to us now? What do you want?" "I seek alliance," Silas said, voice grave. For I too bear a flame, a silver one, one born of the void between life and death. It is the balance that holds the shadow at bay, but the cost is great. Elias studied Silas, feeling the chill that radiated from the stranger's presence. The forest whispered warnings in his mind, but also a strange pull and uneasy familiarity. What is this shadow you speak of? Elias pressed. Silas's eyes glowed brighter. An ancient force older than the forest itself. It feeds on fear, on broken promises and forgotten sins. It was sealed away long ago by a truce between wardens and spirits, but that seal weakens with each passing day. Maeve's flame flickered, casting long shadows as the mist thickened around them. If this shadow returns, Silas nodded, it will consume all. The forest, the wardens, the world beyond. Only united can we hope to withstand it. Elias's green flame pulsed fiercely, echoing his rising resolve. Then we must learn what it wants and how to stop it. The rain began anew, steady and relentless, as the four flames, green, blue, bone, and silver, flickered together, casting an eerie glow in the heart of the ancient woods. The murmuring dark had deepened, and the true battle was just beginning. The rain whispered ceaselessly through the forest, the steady tapping like a somber hymn to the night's unfolding mystery. The glow of the four flames, green, blue, bone, and now silver, wove together, casting fractured light upon the damp earth and twisted roots. The campfire sputtered between them, the warm orange flicker a fragile heart amidst the cold shadows. Silas sat with a solemn grace, the silver flame in his lantern a stark contrast to the others, cold and shimmering like a distant star caught in the void. His eyes, bright with the same eerie glow, flicked from Elias to Maeve and back again, carrying the weight of centuries in their gaze. I was once a guardian, Silas began, voice low and resonant, long before the hunger was born and before the wardens as you know them came to be. I belonged to the Order of the Silver Flame, a group tasked with guarding the balance between life and death, light and shadow. Our flame was forged from the void itself, a power to hold the darkness at bay when all else failed. Elias leaned forward, fascinated and wary. The void? What kind of darkness requires such a flame? Silas's gaze darkened, flickering with memories. Not all darkness is the absence of light. Some shadows are born from broken promises, from hatred, from sins long forgotten. The shadow you face beneath this forest is one such darkness, a primordial force older than the trees, older than the earth itself. It feeds on despair and consumes hope. Maeve's blue flame dimmed slightly, the chill of Silas's words sinking deep. If the hunger was a symptom, what is this shadow's true nature? Silas exhaled slowly, his breath misting in the damp air. It is a hunger far worse than any you have fought. It is a void that devours not just flesh, but spirit and memory. It seeks to unravel the threads of existence, to consume the fabric of life itself. Elias felt the green flame pulse strongly in response, a heartbeat of defiance. How do you know so much? Why have you come to us now? The seals that once bound the shadow are weakening, Silas explained. I have watched from the edges, waiting for those strong enough to stand against it. The wardens who shattered the hunger's curse. Their bloodline carries the power to rekindle the seals, but they cannot do it alone. Maeve frowned. And you? What role do you play in this? Silas looked to his silver flame. I am its keeper, its sentinel. But my power is tied to the void. It is a fragile balance. I cannot face the shadow alone, nor can you. Together, our flames may be the spark to ignite the last defense. Elias felt a mixture of hope and dread stir within him. The forest around them seemed to lean in, leaves rustling softly as if listening. Then we must learn everything, Elias said, resolve hardening. Tell us what we need to do. Silas nodded. First, we must journey to the ruins of the first wardens. There, the original seals were forged, and where the shadow was first imprisoned. It is a place forgotten by time, buried beneath layers of earth and magic. Maeve glanced toward the darkened horizon. The journey will be perilous. The shadow's influence grows with every step. But the fire of determination burned bright among them. The night deepened, the forest's whispers growing louder as the four flames, green, blue, bone, and silver, prepared to face the darkness looming just beyond the trees. The forest's breath was heavy with mist as Elias, Maeve, and Silas set out under the heavy canopy, their lanterns casting long, wavering shadows through the dense underbrush. The rain had ceased, leaving the earth soft and fragrant, but the air was thick with an unspoken tension, as if the trees themselves whispered warnings of dangers lurking in the shadows ahead. The path to the ruins of the first wardens was long and treacherous, winding through tangled roots and ancient groves where the light barely reached. Every step seemed to echo with unseen eyes watching, and the distant howl of creatures long forgotten stirred unease in their hearts. Maeve led, her blue flame steady but cautious, illuminating symbols carved into stone markers, faded with age yet unmistakably warden's sigils, signposts for those who remembered the old ways. Silas walked silently beside Elias, the silver flame pulsing faintly, as if sensing the rising power beneath the earth. His eyes scanned the shadows, alert to every rustle and whisper. "The shadow's reach extends far," Silas murmured. "It twists and corrupts, turning the forest itself against us." A sudden rustling in the underbrush brought them to a halt. Elias raised his green lantern, tendrils of light unfurling like vines, ready to confront whatever emerged. From the shadows stepped a figure, small, cloaked in moss and leaves, eyes gleaming with curiosity and caution. A forest spirit, one of the many ancient guardians who had survived the curse's ravages. "I am Rin," the spirit said, voice like wind through leaves. "I have watched your struggle from the shadows." Maeve stepped forward. "Can you help us reach the ruins safely?" Rin nodded slowly. "The shadow's corruption has grown, and the path is fraught with peril. But I will guide you, for the forest's balance depends on your success." Their journey pressed deeper into the wilderness, the terrain growing wild and unyielding. They crossed blackened swamps where whispered voices tangled in the fog, and climbed steep ridges cloaked in thick brambles that seemed to shift beneath their feet. Each night, as they made camp beneath ancient trees, the forest's whispers grew louder, sometimes distant wails that echoed through the darkness, warnings or perhaps the cries of the lost. One evening, as a cold wind swept through the branches, Silas shared a story from his long past. The first time the shadow had risen, the terrible price paid by the original wardens to bind it, and the sacrifices that left the ruins steeped in sorrow and power. Elias listened, the weight of history pressing heavy on his soul, understanding more deeply the cost of the battle ahead. Finally, after days of travel, the forest began to thin, the trees giving way to crumbling stonework overtaken by creeping vines and moss. Before them lay the ruins of the first wardens, an ancient temple half swallowed by the earth, its towering arches cracked and worn, yet still resonant with the power of forgotten magic. The air thrummed with latent energy, and the green, blue, bone, and silver flames flared in unison, illuminating the moss-covered sigils etched deep into the temple walls. The final confrontation was near. The air hung heavy around the ruins, thick with centuries of silence and secrets. The ancient temple, half devoured by creeping vines and cracked stone, stood as a monument to forgotten power, a place where the past clung stubbornly to the present like moss on weathered walls. The sky above was a muted gray, the forest holding its breath as Elias, Maeve, Silas, and their forest spirit guide Rin stepped cautiously across the threshold. Elias felt the weight of history pressing on him with every step. The green flame in his lantern pulsed erratically, as though sensing the immense power sleeping within these crumbling walls. Maeve's blue flame burned steady, casting sharp shadows that danced against the stone carvings, sigils of wardens long dead, their eyes eternally watching. Silas's silver flame shimmered faintly, its cold light reflecting the cautious glint in his gaze. Rin, ever silent, moved ahead with the grace of the forest itself, weaving through the ruins with uncanny familiarity. "This place is alive," Maeve whispered. "Not in the way of growing things, but in a deeper, older way." Elias nodded, feeling the pulse beneath his feet, like a heartbeat, slow and steady but faint. "The seals, they're still here, waiting." As they ventured deeper, the walls began to hum with energy. The carvings on the pillars glowed softly, faint green and blue lines intertwining with silver, illuminating the forgotten stories etched in stone. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a low rumble echoed through the chamber. Roots, thicker and darker than any they'd seen, began to writhe from cracks in the floor and walls, twisting and crawling like living serpents. "The ruins are waking," Silas warned, stepping forward with the bone shard glowing fiercely in his hand. "The forest's ancient magic stirs, but it is wary of intruders." Maeve raised her lantern high, blue flames licking the air. "We're not intruders, we are wardens. And we come bearing the hope of healing." The roots recoiled momentarily, then surged forward, blocking their path. Dark tendrils reached toward them, hungry and sharp. Elias stepped into the center of the chamber, green flame flaring to full brightness. He raised the bone shard, chanting the ancient words Silas had taught him, the language of the wardens, woven from the oldest magic. The roots writhed and twisted in response, the glowing carvings on the walls brightening until the chamber was bathed in light. The tendrils hesitated, then slowly retreated into the cracks. A voice, ancient and resonant, echoed through the chamber. "You who bear the flames of old, why do you awaken the sleeping?" Elias's voice rang clear, steady despite the weight of the moment. "We come to mend the broken, to heal the wounds of the past." The shadow returns and the forest cries out for balance. The light in the chamber shifted, and from the shadows emerged a figure, ethereal and shimmering, the spirit of the first warden, eyes like polished emeralds, robes woven from leaves and light. "I am Ares, guardian of these ruins," she said. "The shadow you face is ancient and terrible, bound to the roots of all life. To bind it again you must rekindle the seals, but the cost is great." Maeve stepped forward, determination burning in her eyes. "We understand the cost. We are ready." Ares extended a hand, and the chamber filled with swirling light, visions of the past playing out around them. The forging of the seals, the sacrifices made, and the shadow's primal rage. "Prepare yourselves," Ares intoned. "For the battle to come will test not only your strength but your very souls." Outside, the forest darkened, and the murmuring deepened. The chamber's swirling light faded, leaving Elias, Maeve, Silas, and Rin standing amid the ancient stones, their breaths shallow, the weight of Ares's words settling heavily over them. Outside, the forest seemed to darken further, shadows creeping closer as if drawn by the growing threat of the awakening shadow. Elias felt the green flame within him pulse steadily, a lifeline to the vast network of forest memories he now carried. Yet beneath that strength, a quiet tremor of doubt gnawed at his core. The trials Ares had spoken of were no mere tests of might, but of spirit, of sacrifice and of the shadows within themselves. Maeve paced slowly, her blue flame flickering in rhythm with the distant thunder. "What kind of trials?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Will we face them together or alone?" Silas, his silver flame casting sharp reflections on the worn stones, stepped forward, his eyes distant with memories. "The wardens of old faced these alone. Each trial is a mirror, reflecting fears, regrets, the darkness buried deep within. To rekindle the seals, we must confront our own shadows before facing the external one." Rin's presence was calm, yet even the forest spirit seemed tense. "The forest will test your bonds and your resolve," the small guardian said. "The shadow feeds on division and despair. Unity is your greatest weapon." Elias nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Then we begin. We cannot afford hesitation." One by one, Ares approached them, laying a glowing hand on each shoulder. The air shimmered and thickened, and suddenly, Elias found himself pulled away, not by physical force but by the pull of memory and emotion. The chamber faded, replaced by darkness pierced only by faint glimmers of green light. He was alone. The weight of years pressed down on him. Faces flashed before his eyes, his family, friends lost to the forest's hunger, names slipping like smoke. His heart ached with grief, regret for those he could not save. The green flame flickered as the shadows whispered, mocking, demanding surrender. "You cannot save them," the voices hissed. "You will lose yourself as they did." Elias's breath hitched, but he forced himself to stand tall, reaching deep within the forest's strength now part of him. "No," he said, voice firm though his hands trembled. "I am more than my losses. I am the forest's memory and its hope." Light surged from his lantern, pushing back the shadows until the faces faded, replaced by the warmth of new roots, new life, emerging from the darkness. With a sudden breath, Elias was pulled back to the chamber. His heart pounded, but his resolve was steel. Next came Maeve's trial. She was enveloped in icy blue mist, a mirror realm of frozen memories. Faces from her past appeared, moments of doubt, fear, and a secret she had buried deep. She faced the spectral image of a loved one she had lost, the weight of unspoken words threatening to shatter her. But with a fierce cry, Maeve's blue flame blazed brighter, consuming the cold and lighting a path forward. Silas was last. His trial was silence, a void of silver darkness that threatened to erase his existence, forcing him to confront the loneliness of centuries spent guarding a balance few understood. His silver flame flickered, then roared as he embraced his solitude not as a curse, but as a purpose. When they regrouped, their breaths were ragged but their spirits renewed. Ares smiled, her emerald eyes gleaming. "You have faced yourselves and survived. Now you are ready to rekindle the seals and face the shadow." Outside, the forest held its breath once more, the murmuring deep and unyielding. The air in the ancient chamber grew heavy once more, the lingering echoes of their trials vibrating softly against the moss-covered stones. Elias, Maeve, Silas, and Rin stood together, each carrying the weight of their personal confrontations but bound now by a deeper understanding, a unity forged in fire, shadow, and sacrifice. Ares, the ethereal guardian, stepped forward. Her presence was radiant, and her voice carried the gravity of ages. The seals you are about to rekindle hold the forest's fate in balance. Each is tied to a different aspect of the forest's essence: life, memory, sacrifice, and balance. Only when all four are reignited can the shadow be contained once more. She guided them to 4 carved pedestals, each etched with the glowing sigils that had begun to pulse softly as they approached. Elias's heart quickened as he realized the first pedestal bore the spiral symbol from his bone shard, the mark of life and renewal. Elias, Ares said gently, you will rekindle the seal of life. Maeve, the seal of memory. Silas, the seal of sacrifice. And Rin, the seal of balance. The 4 stepped to their assigned pedestals, lanterns raised, flames flickering and intertwining with the ethereal glow of the sigils. Elias placed the bone shard upon the stone. A surge of warmth coursed through him as the green flame expanded, tendrils of vibrant light weaving through the carvings. The seal glowed brighter, radiating life into the roots creeping through the chamber. Maeve followed, her blue flame dancing along the sigils. As she chanted the ancient warden's hymn, memories, both joyous and painful, flooded the air, binding the past and present in a fragile harmony. The seal of memory pulsed in response, threads of light entwining with Elias's flame. Silas stepped forward, his silver flame casting eerie shadows as he placed his lantern upon the pedestal. His voice was a solemn murmur as he offered himself in remembrance of all sacrifices made to protect the forest. The seal of sacrifice shimmered with a cold, steady light, solidifying the growing power within the chamber. Finally, Rin moved with quiet grace, placing a glowing orb of forest essence onto the last pedestal. The seal of balance thrummed gently, the combined energy of all 4 seals resonating in perfect synchrony. But as the seals ignited, the chamber trembled violently. Roots erupted from cracks, writhing with renewed malevolence. The shadow was awakening, its rage unleashed in a torrent of dark energy that threatened to tear the very earth apart. From the shadows emerged twisted forms, creatures of bark and bone, eyes burning with corrupted fire. The hunger's remnants, mutated and furious, surged forward in a relentless tide. Elias lifted his green lantern high, the flame roaring to life as he wove tendrils of light to shield them. Maeve's blue flame flared, weaving barriers of cold fire. Silas's silver light cut through the darkness with blades of shimmering energy, while Rin summoned roots and vines to entangle their foes. The battle was fierce and unyielding. Every strike of light was met with a howl of shadow, every barrier tested by relentless assault. Elias felt the power of the seal surge within him, a fierce fire that burned away doubt and fear. But the shadow was cunning, striking at their hearts, attempting to fracture their unity. In the chaos, a piercing cry split the air. Rin had fallen, ensnared by tendrils of darkness. Maeve rushed to his side, her blue flame shielding him as Elias and Silas pushed back the wave of attackers. The forest trembled as the murmuring dark threatened to overwhelm them, but the 4 flames blazed together, a beacon of hope against the consuming night. The first light of dawn filtered weakly through the dense canopy, casting a pale, trembling glow over the battered ruins. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the whispers of leaves and earth heavy with the aftermath of battle. The ground was torn and scarred where twisted roots and dark creatures had clashed against the 4 wardens' flames. Elias knelt beside Rin, whose breath came in shallow gasps. The small forest spirit's once vibrant glow flickered weakly, dimmed by the shadow's relentless assault. Maeve stood nearby, her blue flame steady but tempered with exhaustion, while Silas scanned the edges of the clearing, his silver eyes shadowed with a growing unease. "We held them back," Elias said quietly, voice hoarse but determined. "But barely." Maeve's gaze sharpened. "This was only the beginning. The shadow's influence is deeper and stronger than we feared." Silas's silver flame pulsed faintly as he stepped closer, voice low and grim. "There is a source behind this darkness, something ancient and powerful, hidden far beneath these woods. The ruins guard more than just seals, they guard the gateway to the shadow's heart." Elias felt a chill, the weight of this new revelation pressing down on his shoulders. "If we don't find it, the forest will fall," Maeve finished for him, "and with it everything we fought to protect." Rin stirred weakly, eyes fluttering open. "There is a path," the forest spirit whispered, voice fragile but urgent. A tunnel beneath the ruins. It leads deeper into the earth, closer to the shadow's source. Elias exchanged a glance with Maeve and Silas. The choice was clear, but the danger was immense. "We have no time to lose," Elias said, rising and gathering his lantern. "We must follow that path." As they prepared to descend, Silas's gaze darkened with suspicion. "We need to be cautious. The shadow corrupts not only the land but hearts as well. There may be forces within our own ranks that seek to undermine us." Maeve's blue flame flickered, uncertainty clouding her fierce eyes. "Are you suggesting betrayal?" Silas nodded slowly. "The longer we fight, the more the shadow whispers. We must watch each other, and ourselves." Elias swallowed hard. Trust was their greatest weapon, and their greatest vulnerability. The four gathered at the mouth of the hidden tunnel, the air thick with damp earth and an ancient chill. The green, blue, silver, and fading forest glow intertwined as they stepped into the darkness, the forest's whispered prayers trailing after them. Deep below the ruins, the earth shifted, the murmuring dark alive and watching. And in the shadows, unseen eyes gleamed with hunger and intent. The tunnel's mouth yawned before them like a maw, swallowing the faint daylight and plunging Elias, Maeve, Silas, and Rin into a cold, suffocating blackness. The air was thick with damp earth and the faintest trace of rot, mingling with the metallic tang of ancient magic long buried beneath the forest's roots. Elias lifted his green lantern, the flame flickering against the damp stone walls as they descended into the labyrinthine passage. The walls pulsed faintly, veins of glowing sap weaving through cracks like lifeblood in the bones of the earth. Maeve's blue flame cut sharp shadows into the darkness, while Silas's silver light shimmered with an unnatural chill, illuminating strange sigils etched deep into the rock. The tunnel twisted and sloped downward, the faint sound of dripping water echoing in the silence. Each step seemed to pull them deeper into a forgotten world, one untouched by time but marred by a creeping, insidious corruption. The murmuring dark was here, lurking beyond sight, whispering in tongues older than the forest itself. Rin moved cautiously, his forest essence dim and fragile after the battle. The shadow's presence grows stronger as we descend. It watches, tests us, feeds on our fears. Elias nodded, gripping his lantern tighter. "We must stay together, and remain vigilant." The passage opened into a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow. Jagged stalactites hung like dark teeth, dripping with cold water that splattered on the rocky floor. At the cavern's heart pulsed a great blackened root, a corrupted heartwood that throbbed with dark energy, tendrils stretching outward like grasping fingers. The air grew thick, the green, blue, and silver flames struggling against the oppressive weight of the shadow's power. Suddenly the cavern trembled. From the shadows emerged twisted guardians, forms of wood and shadow, eyes burning with hatred and hunger. Their limbs cracked and groaned as they advanced in relentless waves. Elias raised his lantern high, green flames flaring and weaving into shields and blades of light. Maeve summoned her blue fire, sending arcs of icy flame to freeze and shatter their foes. Silas's silver light cut through the darkness with blades that shimmered like moonlight, while Rin called upon the roots and vines to bind and trap the assailants. But with every creature felled, more seemed to emerge from the darkness, endless and unyielding. As the battle raged, Elias felt the insidious whispers clawing at his mind, the shadow probing for weaknesses, seeking to unravel the bonds of trust and hope. A sudden, piercing cry echoed through the cavern. Maeve stumbled, her flame flickering violently as a spectral shadow lunged and grazed her, leaving a cold burn that threatened to consume her spirit. Silas moved swiftly, casting a barrier of silver light around her, but the attack left a chilling wound, a reminder that the shadow's power was not just physical, but psychological and spiritual. Elias fought through the chaos, feeling the growing strain of the seals and his own newfound powers. The green flame burned bright but fragile, a fragile tether between life and oblivion. The cavern itself seemed to pulse in rhythm with their struggle, ancient magic awakening and responding to the clash of light and shadow. At the far edge of the chamber, a swirling vortex of darkness opened, a gaping wound in the earth that pulsed with malevolent energy. From within, a voice whispered, low and cold, promising despair and oblivion. Elias knew this was the heart of the shadow's power. Their final confrontation was close. The cavern's oppressive gloom thickened around them like a suffocating shroud, the air heavy with the bitter tang of decay and ancient malevolence. The swirling vortex of darkness at the far end pulsed with a rhythm that felt impossibly slow and yet inexorably relentless, like the steady beat of a heart forged in the blackest abyss. It was the shadow's core, the source of corruption feeding the forest's twisted hunger, and Elias knew with a bone-deep certainty that confronting it would demand more than strength, it would demand their very souls. The four wardens gathered at the cavern's edge, their lanterns burning as fiercely as their resolve. Elias's green flame flickered nervously, whispering ancient secrets and forgotten promises. Maeve's blue fire danced, a cold flame burning with quiet fury, while Silas's silver light shimmered like fractured moonbeams cutting through the darkness. Even Rin, though weak, summoned roots and moss to bind their footing to the earth, unwilling to yield the forest's final sanctuary without a fight. Elias took a deep breath, feeling the surge of power coursing through him. The legacy of all wardens past, the weight of memory and sacrifice. The air around them pulsed with the shadow's malevolent energy, pressing against their minds with invisible fingers, probing for cracks to exploit. Then the voice came again. It slithered through the darkness, honeyed and cruel. "You are but flickering flames," it whispered, "against an eternal night. Why cling to hope when all will be consumed?" Elias's grip tightened around the bone shard, his voice steady. "Because even the smallest flame can light the darkest night." The shadow laughed, a sound like bones grinding beneath the earth. Tendrils of darkness unfurled from the vortex, twisting like serpents as they lunged at the wardens. The battle erupted with savage fury. Elias wove green flames into shields and blades, striking at the creeping tendrils. Maeve's blue fire hissed as it seared through shadowy forms, while Silas's silver light carved brilliant arcs, each strike illuminating fragments of the blackness. Rin summoned roots that writhed and coiled, ensnaring the enemy even as the cavern trembled. But the shadow's power was immense. It attacked not just their bodies but their minds. Visions of doubt, fear, and despair swirled around them, whispers of failure, memories twisted into nightmares. Elias caught Maeve's eye as a shadowy vision of loss tried to unravel her resolve. She clenched her fists, flames burning brighter as she whispered a fierce promise to herself. Silas fought his own torment, a haunting loneliness clawing at him, but he steeled his spirit, silver light blazing like a beacon in the dark. Despite the onslaught, the wardens held firm, their unity their greatest weapon. They chanted the ancient hymn, their voices weaving a tapestry of light and power that pushed back the shadow's tide. Suddenly, Elias felt a searing pain. A dark tendril had wrapped around his lantern, smothering the green flame. Panic surged, but with a roar of will, he summoned the deepest reserves of his power. Light exploded from the bone shard, a blinding radiance that shattered the tendril and sent ripples of purifying energy through the cavern. The shadow shrieked, its core flickering as the seal's power rekindled and surged. With a final unified effort, the wardens channeled their flames into the vortex. The seals ignited in a brilliant cascade of light, the shadow's heart unraveling and dissolving into the ether. The cavern shook, the oppressive darkness lifting like a suffocating fog retreating before dawn. Breathless and battered, Elias, Maeve, Silas, and Rin stood amid the quiet ruins, their flames still glowing but tempered by exhaustion. The shadow was broken, but its scars remained. And as the forest whispered its gratitude, Elias knew that the battle had changed them forever, not just as wardens but as keepers of a fragile, enduring hope. The cavern was bathed in a soft, warm light, the first true light in what felt like an age. The oppressive weight of the shadow had lifted, leaving behind a silence that was both profound and fragile. The four wardens stood amidst the ancient stones, their flames flickering gently, no longer battling the darkness but embracing the dawn. Elias lowered his lantern, its green flame now steady and calm, like a heartbeat syncing with the forest's renewed rhythm. Around them, the roots that had writhed with corruption now pulsed softly with life, weaving through the earth like veins of hope. The air smelled fresh and alive, filled with the scent of rain-soaked earth and new growth. Maeve knelt beside a patch of moss, her blue flame illuminating tiny shoots breaking through the soil. "It's healing," she whispered, awe threading her voice. "The forest is waking from its nightmare." Silas stood quietly, his silver flame reflecting in his eyes, now softened, filled with a weary peace. "The balance has been restored, but it is delicate. We must be vigilant, for darkness always lingers at the edges of light." Rin, though weak, smiled faintly, the glow of the forest spirit flickering back to life. "The forest remembers its wardens, and they remember the forest. Together we will watch over it." Elias felt the weight of his new role settle comfortably within him. The mantle of the warden was no longer a burden but a sacred duty, one that connected him to every leaf, every root, and every whisper carried on the wind. As they emerged from the ruins, the forest greeted them with a symphony of life, birdsong weaving through the trees, the gentle rustle of leaves stirred by a soft breeze, and the steady drip of lingering rain. The canopy was brighter, sunlight filtering through the branches, scattering dappled patterns on the forest floor. They walked slowly, each step a testament to survival and renewal. The scars left by the shadow's hunger were visible, the charred remains of ancient trees, the broken earth where the battle had raged, but even these bore the promise of rebirth. Elias paused, looking up at the sky breaking through the leaves. "This is not the end," he said softly. "It's a beginning. For the forest, for us, all who call this place home." Maeve nodded, her blue flame pulsing gently. "And for the wardens who will come after us. We've rekindled more than seals, we've rekindled hope." Silas smiled faintly. The story of the murmuring dark is one of endless cycles, of shadow and light, loss and renewal. But as long as we remember, the forest endures. Rin's voice was a gentle murmur, like leaves rustling in a soft wind. "The forest will grow stronger, and so will we." Together, they made their way deeper into the woods, their lanterns lighting the path forward. A path woven with memories, sacrifice, and the eternal whisper of the green flame. The forest's murmuring was no longer a voice of fear, but a song of life. The forest had begun to breathe anew, its breath a slow exhale of damp earth and budding leaves, but Elias sensed that the calm was only the surface of a much larger, more tangled tale. The shadow's defeat had woven threads of light back into the ancient woods, yet the world beyond still whispered secrets, echoes that refused to be silenced. As the wardens ventured deeper into the rejuvenated forest, the canopy opened up to reveal unfamiliar paths and forgotten clearings. Moss-covered stones bore carvings in unfamiliar runes, and distant sounds, faint murmurs, the distant toll of a bell, hinted at a history entwined with far older powers than even the ruins of the first wardens. Maeve paused beside a weathered stone altar, fingers tracing the worn edges of a sigil glowing faintly with blue flame. "These markings, they speak of another order," she murmured. "A circle of wardens who guarded not just the forest, but the borders between worlds." Silas's silver flame pulsed thoughtfully. Borders between worlds? The veil between realms is thin here. Perhaps the shadow's influence was but a symptom of a greater fracture, one that threatens not only the forest but the fabric of reality itself. Elias felt a chill ripple through the air, the green flame responding to unseen currents of power. "Then our battle is far from over." Their journey led them to a secluded glade where an ancient stone archway stood, a gateway half swallowed by vines and time. Symbols danced along its surface, shifting subtly as if alive. Beyond the arch, a swirling mist shimmered, beckoning yet forbidding. Rin stepped forward, his voice reverent. "This is the threshold, a passage to the realms beyond. Few have crossed it and returned." Maeve's eyes glinted with resolve. "If the shadow source lies beyond this veil, we must follow. For the forest, for all worlds connected by this fragile boundary." The four wardens joined hands, their flames intertwining in a radiant dance of green, blue, silver, and the lingering essence of the forest's heartbeat. Together, they stepped through the threshold, the mist curling around them like liquid light. On the other side, the world shifted, a twilight realm where time wavered and shadows moved with sentient purpose. The sky above was a tapestry of swirling stars and shifting colors, and the ground beneath their feet pulsed with a strange energy. Here, the forest's voice was distant but still present, woven into the very fabric of this liminal space. Yet something else lingered, a deeper, colder darkness that twisted and writhed beyond sight. Elias's heart quickened. "We have crossed into the realm between worlds. The true source of the shadow's hunger may lie here waiting." Maeve's blue flame brightened, casting light into the creeping gloom. "We must be ready for whatever waits." Silas nodded, silver flame steady as a blade. "Our unity is our strength. But in this place, even that may be tested." The murmuring dark was no longer confined to the forest. It had spilled beyond into the shadowed borders of existence itself. And the wardens would need every ounce of their courage and light to face what came next. Stepping beyond the threshold, Elias, Maeve, Silas, and Rin entered a realm unlike any they had known. A place suspended between reality and dream, where time flowed unevenly and the very air thrummed with a strange, unsettling energy. The sky above swirled with colors that defied earthly description. Violets melting into silver, bursts of crimson fading into endless dusk. The ground beneath their feet was soft but unsteady, as though the earth itself breathed with a slow, uncertain pulse. Elias tightened his grip on his lantern, the green flame flickering as if unsettled by the unfamiliar environment. Maeve's blue fire danced nervously, casting eerie shadows that seemed to shift with intent. Silas's silver light remained steady, but even he could not hide the flicker of unease that passed through his eyes. Rin, though a creature of forest roots and earth, seemed transformed. His form dimmer, yet somehow more solid, as if shaped by this realm's strange magic. "This place, it is a realm of in-between," Rin whispered, voice barely audible above the hum of the twilight air. "A place where the boundaries between worlds blur, and spirits roam untethered." Elias glanced around, noting the faint outlines of shifting shapes among the hazy mists, creatures of shadow and light, neither fully here nor gone. They moved with grace and purpose, their eyes glowing with knowledge and sorrow. Suddenly, a figure stepped forward from the mist, a tall, slender being cloaked in a robe woven from starlight and shadow. Its face was obscured by a mask of polished bone, etched with symbols that shimmered faintly. "I am Leora," the figure said, voice like the rustle of ancient leaves. "Guardian of the Twilight Veil, keeper of balance between realms." Maeve stepped forward cautiously. "We seek the source of the shadow's corruption, its root beyond the forest. Will you aid us?" Leora regarded them silently, then nodded slowly. "The shadow you battled in the forest is but a fragment of a greater darkness that festers here, the Voidborn. They hunger for the unraveling of worlds, feeding on despair and division." Silas's silver flame flickered. "How do we stop such a force?" "The veil weakens," Leora said. "Its threads fray as the Voidborn grow stronger. To restore balance, you must mend the veil's broken strands, lost artifacts scattered across this realm, each holding a piece of the Warden's ancient power." Elias felt the familiar weight of purpose settle on his shoulders once more. "Where do we begin?" Leora gestured toward a distant glimmering tower, half submerged in the swirling mists. "The first artifact lies within the Spire of Echoes. But beware, the Voidborn do not yield their secrets lightly." As they prepared to move, the mist thickened, shapes emerging with growing clarity, whispering shadows with hollow eyes, tendrils of darkness reaching for their light. Elias raised his lantern, green flames weaving protective wards as the Wardens readied themselves for the battles to come. The Twilight Veil stretched endlessly before them, a realm of peril and mystery, where every step tested their courage and every shadow threatened to consume their hope. The mist hung thick around their ankles, swirling like restless spirits as Elias, Maeve, Silas, and Rin pressed onward through the shifting twilight realm. The world they traversed was unlike any they had known, a landscape caught between dream and nightmare, where the sky burned with a pale, shifting light and the ground seemed to breathe beneath their feet. Time here was fluid, moments stretching and collapsing in waves that tugged at their senses and challenged their resolve. Elias's green flame flickered, struggling against the damp air, but he forced it higher. "The Spire of Echoes is close," he said, voice steady though edged with tension. "We must stay alert." Maeve's blue fire glimmered, reflecting in her narrowed eyes. "The longer we remain in this place, the more the shadows twist our fears into reality. We cannot let them divide us." Silas's silver light cut sharp through the haze, illuminating ghostly forms that shimmered at the edge of perception. Creatures neither wholly alive nor dead, their hollow eyes tracking the Warden's every step. "The Voidborn are cunning," he murmured. "They know how to feed on doubt." Rin moved silently beside them, his form blending with the creeping moss and vines that seemed to cling to the very fabric of this realm. "The spire will test not just your strength but your memories. The echoes within will draw out your deepest fears and regrets." As they advanced, the landscape grew more surreal. Trees twisted impossibly, their branches reaching like skeletal hands. The ground rippled like liquid glass beneath their boots, reflecting fragmented images of their pasts, visions of loss, pain, and moments they wished forgotten. Elias felt the weight of those reflections pressing on him. Faces of loved ones lost, decisions questioned, and the shadow of doubt that sometimes whispered, "Are you truly ready to bear this burden?" He clenched his fists, green flames flaring fiercely to push back the creeping despair. At last, they reached the base of the spire, a towering structure of gleaming black stone that stretched upward, vanishing into swirling mists above. Its surface shimmered with shifting runes, each pulse resonating with the Warden's own magic. The entrance was a vast archway, guarded by statues of Wardens long gone, their eyes alight with silent warnings. As the four stepped inside, the air shifted. The walls reverberated with soft echoes, whispers of memories long buried, secrets waiting to be unearthed. Within the spire, corridors twisted like labyrinths, each step accompanied by the soft murmur of voices, some comforting, others laced with menace. Suddenly, the path split into three, each corridor glowing with a distinct hue: emerald green, sapphire blue, and silver white. Leora's words echoed in their minds: mend the veil's broken strands, lost artifacts scattered across this realm, each holding a piece of the Warden's ancient power. Each path holds an artifact, Elias said quietly. We must choose wisely. Maeve met his gaze. Perhaps splitting up is our only chance to retrieve them all before the Voidborn can stop us. Silas nodded slowly. But we must trust one another. Our unity is the key to surviving these trials. With a final glance, they separated. Elias toward the greenlit corridor, Maeve the blue, and Silas the silver. Rin lingered briefly, then followed Silas, his presence a tether to the forest's fading strength. Alone, Elias ventured deeper into the green corridor, the walls alive with swirling vines and luminous leaves. Whispers caressed his ears, memories unfolding like petals, reminders of the forest's heartbeat, the life he fought to protect. But soon the shadows shifted, growing teeth and claws, and the true test began. Elias stepped cautiously into the verdant corridor, the walls alive with a vibrant pulse that seemed to echo the very rhythm of the forest's heart. Luminous leaves and vines spiraled along the smooth black stone, their glow casting soft emerald hues that flickered like breathing light. The air smelled of damp earth and fresh growth, but beneath that fragrance lay an undercurrent of something ancient and potent, something both protective and perilous. As he advanced, the whispers in the air grew louder, weaving around him like a symphony of memories and life itself. Voices of the forest's ancestors, wardens long past, murmured encouragement and caution. Some words he recognized, old wardens' hymns. Others were fragmented echoes of lives entwined with the woods. Suddenly, the corridor widened into a vast chamber filled with colossal roots twisting and coiling, creating a labyrinthine maze. At the center pulsed a radiant orb of emerald light, the artifact Elias sought, a crystalline heart of pure life energy, shimmering with the promise of renewal. But the moment he stepped forward, the roots shuddered. From the shadows emerged the guardians of life, ethereal beings woven from leaves, bark, and shimmering light. Their forms shifted and flickered, faces indistinct yet alive with fierce purpose. One guardian, taller and more radiant than the others, stepped forward, its voice a low, rustling sound like wind through branches. Who dares seek the heart of life? Only those worthy may claim its power. Elias raised his lantern, green flames flickering with resolve. I am Elias, warden of the forest's memory and hope. I seek to mend the broken veil and protect all life from the shadow's hunger. The guardian's eyes glowed brighter. Then you must prove your bond with the forest is true. The trial is not of strength alone, but of spirit and sacrifice. Before Elias could respond, the roots around the chamber came alive, twisting into forms that blocked the path and threatened to ensnare him. Shadows flickered between the foliage, whispering fears and doubts. Failures, losses, the burden of responsibility. Elias felt the weight pressing against his mind, the faces of those he could not save, the moments he had faltered, the creeping fear that he was not enough. But he summoned the green flame deep within, breathing steady and calm. I am part of the forest, and the forest is part of me, he whispered. I carry its memory, its pain, and its hope. The flame blossomed, sending waves of vibrant light rippling through the roots. The shadows recoiled and the tendrils relaxed, forming a pathway toward the glowing orb. Elias moved with reverence, placing his hand upon the artifact. Energy surged through him, a surge of life, growth, and renewal. Visions of flourishing forests, unbroken cycles of seasons, and new beginnings filled his mind. As the chamber brightened, the guardians bowed, their forms dissolving into streams of light that wove into the walls, strengthening the veil's fabric. Elias felt his connection deepen, not just to the forest but to all life it sustained. He knew the path ahead would be harder still, but this victory kindled a fierce flame within him, a promise that even in darkness, life endures. Maeve stepped through the sapphire-lit archway, leaving behind the verdant life-energy corridor Elias had conquered. The air shifted immediately, a cool, almost crystalline chill settled around her, carrying the scent of old parchment and forgotten songs. The walls of the corridor shimmered with the faint outlines of faces and places, memories woven into the very fabric of the stone. Each step she took echoed softly, as if time itself was listening. Her blue flame flickered nervously, the soft glow casting delicate patterns along the walls, illuminating symbols etched with the precision of ancient hands, runes of remembrance, mourning, and hope. The seal of memory awaited her deep within this labyrinth of echoes, and she knew this trial would test the very core of her spirit. As she moved deeper, faint voices began to whisper, growing louder and clearer. They were fragments of lives lived long ago. Laughter, cries, moments of love and loss. Maeve recognized some memories shared by the forest itself, the collective heartbeats of generations bound to these woods. But not all memories were gentle. Some twisted into painful regrets, haunting failures, and unspoken fears. The shadows lengthened, reaching for her mind, threading doubt and sorrow like a web. She paused before a shimmering pool, its surface like liquid glass reflecting scenes from her own past. Images flickered, her family long lost to the creeping blight of the forest, faces she had sworn to protect, moments when she had faltered and turned away. The weight of grief pressed on her chest, threatening to drown her in sorrow. Maeve knelt beside the pool, her blue flame dimming as tears welled in her eyes. Why did I fail? Could I have saved them if I had been stronger? The whispers swirled, voices echoing both accusation and understanding. Then a gentle warmth brushed her cheek, a memory of her mother's voice, steady and comforting. Even the strongest hearts carry scars, Maeve. Remember the light that lives in the shadows. Maeve closed her eyes and took a deep breath, her blue flame reigniting, brighter and steadier than before. I am not defined by my failures but by what I choose to protect. My memories are my strength, not my chains. The walls trembled as the echoes responded, shimmering and shifting to reveal a hidden passage. Steeling herself, Maeve stepped through, entering a vast chamber where the seal of memory pulsed softly, a crystal orb swirling with blue light, suspended within a lattice of glowing vines. Guarding it was a spectral figure, a warden of old whose eyes held centuries of sorrow and wisdom. The figure spoke without words, communicating through a flood of memories, moments of sacrifice, courage, and loss that Maeve was called to embrace. The trial demanded that Maeve relive the most painful memories, confront the guilt and grief she had carried hidden, and emerge not broken but whole. As the spectral memories washed over her, Maeve stood firm, her flame weaving a tapestry of light that embraced the pain, turning it into a source of healing and resolve. When the trial ended, the seal of memory shone brilliantly, its light merging with Maeve's flame, binding her closer to the forest's past and future. Breathing deeply, Maeve stepped from the chamber, her heart heavy but her spirit resolute. Outside the blue corridor, the eerie twilight realm awaited, and she knew the next challenges would test her even more. Silas stepped into the silver corridor, where the light shimmered like cold moonlight on still water. The air was crisp, tinged with a faint metallic scent, and the walls were etched with intricate patterns, threads of shimmering silver that twisted and braided like the woven fate of countless souls. The corridor felt heavier here, the weight of sacrifice lingering in every breath, every shadow. Beside him, Rin moved with a slow grace, his form a faint glow amid the mist that curled along the floor. The forest spirit's presence was fragile, but Silas knew his companion was vital, not just for their mission, but as a living connection to the world they fought to save. The silver flame in Silas's lantern pulsed steadily, casting light on ancient symbols and scenes depicting countless acts of sacrifice. Warriors falling to protect their kin, wardens laying down their lives to seal dark forces, and spirits relinquishing their essence to preserve balance. A low hum vibrated through the corridor, growing into a chorus of whispered prayers and lamentations. Silas felt the echoes brush against his soul, the burdens borne by those who had given everything for the forest's survival. As they advanced, the corridor opened into a vast hall lined with mirrors, each reflecting not just their images, but fragments of memories tied to sacrifice. Silas caught glimpses of faces from his past, friends lost in battle, moments when he had chosen duty over self, and times when his resolve had wavered. A figure appeared in the center of the hall, a warden cloaked in silver light, eyes deep pools of sorrow and determination. To claim the seal of sacrifice, you must confront what you are willing to give, and what you cannot. Silas nodded, steeling himself. I am ready. The mirrors began to shimmer, each showing a different path. One where Silas abandoned his duty to save a loved one, another where he sacrificed himself to save the forest, and a third where he walked away from both, choosing survival over sacrifice. Each vision tugged at his heart, testing his resolve and sense of self. The line between courage and fear blurred as the hall whispered the painful question, "What are you willing to lose?" Silas's silver flame flared as he focused inward, accepting the weight of his choices and their consequences. He embraced the pain, the loss, and the hope intertwined within the sacrifice. The hall glowed with a brilliant light as the mirrors shattered, revealing the seal of sacrifice, a radiant crystal imbued with the essence of countless wardens' selflessness. Silas reached out, feeling the warmth of the seal bind with his flame. A surge of strength and clarity filled him, the burden of sacrifice transforming into a source of power and purpose. Rin stepped forward, his faint glow brightening as the seal's light wove into the fabric of the forest spirit's essence. Together, they turned toward the corridor's exit, ready to reunite with Elias and Maeve. Yet Silas knew the trials ahead would demand even greater sacrifices. As they walked through the shimmering passage, shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, reminders that the Voidborn still watched, waiting to exploit any weakness. Silas's voice was steady but low. Our unity is fragile, but it is our greatest strength. We must protect it. Rin's soft murmur was filled with quiet resolve. The forest's fate, in all realms, depends on it. Outside the silver corridor, the twilight realm stretched before them, vast and uncertain. The warden's journey was far from over. The swirling mists of the twilight veil curled around the three wardens as they emerged from their separate trials, each carrying the weight and power of their newfound artifacts. Elias's green flame burned with renewed vigor, Maeve's blue fire shimmered with clarity and grace, and Silas's silver light glowed steady, carrying the solemn strength of sacrifice. Behind them, Rin's forest spirit form pulsed gently with the harmony of their combined energies. The air between them hummed with tension, not just from the realm's eerie atmosphere, but from the lingering shadows that sought to unravel their unity. The wardens knew that the greatest test was not only the artifacts they had reclaimed but the bonds they maintained amid the encroaching darkness. Elias broke the silence first, voice rough but steady. We've all faced the Veil's trials and none of us emerged unchanged. The artifacts bind us more closely, but the shadows still whisper. Maeve nodded, her gaze sharp despite the fatigue etched in her features. The memories, the sacrifices, we carry them not as burdens but as shields. But I sense the Voidborn's power growing stronger. They know we are close. Silas's silver light flickered, a somber shadow passing through his eyes. They have watched us, waiting for cracks. We must be wary, not only of the darkness outside but the shadows within ourselves. Rin's soft voice wove through the heavy air like a breeze through leaves. The veil's threads are fragile. To mend them we must face the heart of the realm. The source of the fracture lies beyond the spire, in the realm's core. Elias exhaled, a flicker of doubt passing through him before the green flame steadied once more. Then that is where we must go. Together, the wardens advanced toward the spire's apex, the path winding through shifting shadows and shimmering light. The twilight veil itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, an ancient force watching, waiting to see if the wardens would succeed or be consumed. As they climbed, whispers turned to voices, fragments of past wardens, warnings, and pleas woven into the very stone. The weight of history pressed upon them, yet it also strengthened their resolve. Near the summit, the landscape opened into a vast chamber, an orb of pure twilight energy suspended in the air, its surface fracturing like cracked glass. This was the heart of the realm's fracture, the wound from which the Voidborn's corruption sprang. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in darkness, eyes like voids that swallowed light. It spoke without moving its lips, a voice that echoed inside their minds. You seek to mend what should remain broken. The veil must fall for new power to rise. Join me and transcend your fragile bonds. The wardens exchanged glances, knowing this was not only a battle of power but of will. The Voidborn sought to unravel their unity, to feed on fear and division. Elias lifted his lantern, green flames blazing forth. We are stronger together, bound by purpose and hope. Maeve's blue fire surged, casting light into the encroaching shadows. Your darkness will not consume us. Silas's silver light cut through the void, a blade forged from sacrifice and determination. The battle for the Twilight Veil's heart had begun, a clash not just of flame and shadow but of trust, memory, and sacrifice. The fate of the forest, the realms beyond, and the fragile balance between light and dark hung in the balance. The chamber pulsed with raw energy, the fractured orb of twilight light hanging suspended above like a wounded star, casting eerie reflections that danced on the walls. The oppressive silence shattered as the Voidborn figure stepped forward, a shifting shadow of impossible darkness that seemed to devour all light it touched. Its eyes, twin abysses, burned with a hunger that gnawed at the very souls of the wardens. Elias felt a cold grip tighten around his heart, the shadow's presence invading his mind like a creeping frost. Yet he steadied his breath and raised his lantern high, green flames flaring defiantly. Together, he murmured, voice firm though the shadow whispered doubt into his thoughts. Maeve's blue fire ignited, a sharp, crystalline flame that cracked the dark. Silas's silver light shone steady and true, and Rin's essence pulsed as roots and vines stirred beneath the chamber's floor, reaching upward to aid their guardians. The Voidborn's voice echoed inside their heads, seductive and cruel. You cannot hold together what is destined to fall apart. Your memories are chains, your sacrifices futile. Yield and join the eternal night. But the wardens stood as one, their lights weaving together into a tapestry of strength. The shattered orb above flickered, a fracture deepening. The Voidborn struck first, a wave of shadow sweeping forward, tendrils lashing like vipers. Elias met it with a shield of green flame, the heat pushing back the cold darkness, but the tendrils found cracks, snaking past defenses to claw at his spirit. Maeve launched shards of blue fire, each like a frozen spear piercing the void. Silas moved with graceful precision, silver light carving paths through the shadows, illuminating glimpses of the Voidborn's form, twisting, shifting, impossibly vast. Rin called forth roots that erupted through the floor, binding the tendrils and tearing at the shadows like living chains. Yet, for every tendril restrained, two more emerged, relentless, infinite. The battle stretched on, a tempest of light and shadow swirling through the chamber. The fractured orb pulsed wildly, threatening to shatter and unleash chaos. Within the storm, the Voidborn focused its assault on the Warden's unity, whispering lies and conjuring visions designed to fracture their bonds. Elias saw fleeting images of Maeve abandoning the fight, Silas consumed by doubt, Rin fading into the mist. The shadows spoke of failure and loneliness, unraveling threads of trust. But the wardens clung to each other's light, voices rising in an ancient warden's hymn, a chant of memory, sacrifice, and life that wove through the chamber, strengthening their flames and weaving the fractured light into a fragile whole. Elias, feeling the warmth of their unity flood his soul, focused his green flame into a spear of pure energy, aiming directly at the heart of the Voidborn's shadowy form. Maeve, Silas, and Rin combined their flames, blue, silver, and the forest's essence, forming a radiant vortex that enveloped the spear, amplifying its power. With a roar of defiance, Elias thrust the spear forward, piercing the fractured orb. A blinding explosion of light erupted, shattering the shadow and sending waves of purifying energy rippling through the twilight veil. The Voidborn's form dissolved into wisps of darkness, the chamber's oppressive weight lifting as the orb mended, its fractured light restoring balance. Breathless, the wardens lowered their flames, their unity unbroken, their resolve stronger than ever. The heart of the realm was healed, but the echoes of the battle lingered, a reminder that vigilance and sacrifice would forever be entwined. The brilliant light that exploded from the fractured orb lingered in the chamber like the fading embers of a great fire, bathing every surface in a warm, golden glow. The oppressive shadows that had once gripped the twilight veil dissolved into nothingness, replaced by a serene calmness that settled over the realm like a gentle dawn after a long, harrowing night. Elias lowered his lantern, green flame now steady and soft, no longer the fierce blaze of battle but a steady beacon of hope. Maeve's blue fire shimmered with a tranquil brilliance, reflecting her inner peace despite the lingering weight of what they had faced. Silas's silver light glowed quietly, a solemn reminder of the sacrifices they had endured and those still to come. Even Rin, the forest spirit, pulsed faintly with renewed vigor, his form more solid, more present, as though the forest's essence had been breathed back into him. They stood together in the chamber's center, the healed orb now a symbol of unity and balance, radiating a gentle, unwavering light. The realm around them shifted, the swirling mists calming, the eerie hues softening into hues of gentle twilight that promised renewal rather than decay. For a long moment, silence reigned, an unspoken acknowledgement of the battles fought, the victories won, and the scars etched deep into their souls. Elias finally spoke, his voice low but resolute. The veil is mended, but the cost, it is heavy. We carry more than artifacts. We carry memories, losses, and the weight of all those who have come before us. Maeve nodded, her eyes distant but resolute. This realm has shown me the strength of remembrance, how our past shapes our future. But it also showed me the dangers of clinging too tightly to pain and regret. We must move forward with compassion, for ourselves and for the forest. Silas's gaze was steady. Sacrifice is the thread that binds us all. We've given much, yet I fear there is more to come. The Voidborn may be defeated here, but the echoes of their hunger will ripple through the worlds. Our vigilance cannot waver. Rin's voice was a gentle murmur, like the rustling of leaves in a soft wind. The forest breathes once more, but it is still fragile. We are its guardians, not just of the trees and earth, but of the balance that holds all realms together. Elias looked at each of his companions, a fierce gratitude swelling in his chest. We began this journey as wardens of the forest. Now we are wardens of the veil itself, a living bridge between worlds. The thought settled between them, heavy with both responsibility and hope. The twilight veil was no longer a place of despair but a realm of possibility, a threshold where light could endure even in the deepest shadow. As they turned to leave the chamber, a soft voice echoed from the orb, barely audible but filled with warmth. The light you carry is eternal. It will guide those who come after you. Outside the spire, the twilight realm stretched wide and welcoming. The mists now shimmered with promise rather than menace, and distant stars twinkled like watchful eyes. The wardens walked forward, their flames glowing gently in harmony. They had faced the murmuring dark and its deeper shadows, emerging stronger, united, and ready to guard the fragile balance of all worlds. The forest awaited them, healed yet vigilant, ancient yet ever-growing. And so their journey continued. The journey back through the threshold was like passing through a veil of memories, soft and thick with the scent of rain and moss, the familiar hum of earth and life welcoming them home. As the wardens stepped from the twilight realm into the waking forest, the air seemed to sigh in relief, vibrant with renewal. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, dappled and warm, touching the leaves with a golden glow that had been absent for far too long. Elias inhaled deeply, the green flame in his lantern steady and pure, no longer flickering with uncertainty. The familiar chorus of birdsong wove through the trees, a symphony of rebirth that danced on the breeze. Here, amid the towering trunks and soft undergrowth, the forest's heartbeat thrummed steady and strong. Maeve ran her fingers over the rough bark of an ancient oak, its surface alive with new shoots. "The corruption has receded," she whispered, awe and gratitude mingling in her voice. "The forest is healing, because of us." Silas surveyed the landscape with careful eyes, noting the patches of vibrant green spreading where once there had been blight and decay. "The balance has shifted," he said softly, "but the world beyond still watches, and the veil's healing will ripple slowly." Rin's form shimmered briefly, roots stretching and intertwining with the earth beneath their feet, drawing strength from the forest's renewed vigor. "This land is alive, older than memory, stronger than shadow. We are but its wardens, entrusted with its protection." The path ahead was not without its scars. Here and there, blackened stumps and shattered branches spoke of the fierce battle fought, a reminder of the fragility of life and the cost of darkness. But life was returning, creeping like gentle waves across the wounded earth, reclaiming and renewing. Elias looked to his companions, a fierce hope burning within. Our fight was for this moment, the chance to witness the forest's rebirth and to stand guard against whatever comes next. Maeve smiled faintly. "And we will not face it alone. The forest remembers us and we remember it." As they ventured deeper, they found signs of new life sprouting from the soil, delicate ferns unfurling, wildflowers blooming in bright bursts of color, and saplings reaching skyward with determined grace. The air was alive with the hum of insects and the flutter of wings, carrying the promise of a future forged through sacrifice and hope. But beneath the surface, subtle currents of magic whispered still, reminders that the murmuring dark shadow, though weakened, had not vanished entirely. The wardens knew their vigilance must endure, that the balance between light and shadow was an eternal dance. Elias paused beside a gentle stream, its waters clear and singing softly over smooth stones. He dipped his hand in, feeling the cool life force flowing through it. "This forest, this realm, it is a living story. We are its authors now, guardians of the chapters yet to be written." The others nodded, their flames glowing softly in the fading light. As twilight settled once more, the wardens lit a small campfire beneath the ancient boughs, a circle of warmth in the growing night. Their flames intertwined, a quiet beacon in the forest's embrace. Together they sat, listening to the wind whisper through the leaves, carrying with it the eternal murmuring dark, a tale of shadow and light, of fear and courage, of endings and beginnings. And as sleep claimed the world outside, the forest breathed steady, its heart beating strong beneath the stars. As dawn's pale light seeped through the dense canopy, painting the forest floor in soft golds and greens, the wardens stirred beside their campfire. The night had been silent, save for the gentle crackling of embers and the distant calls of awakening birds. Yet, beneath that quiet surface, an unsettling feeling pulsed, a murmur too subtle to grasp but too persistent to ignore. Elias was the first to rise, his eyes scanning the horizon where shadow still clung stubbornly to the edges of the forest. His lantern, now a calm emerald glow, hung from his wrist as he moved toward the thick undergrowth. The air smelled fresher here, but faint hints of decay lingered in the soil, as though some ancient sickness still lay hidden beneath the new growth. Maeve followed, her blue flame flickering faintly as she knelt beside a gnarled root twisting out from the earth. Her fingers brushed the bark, feeling a faint vibration, a whisper in the roots that tugged at her awareness. "The forest remembers," she murmured. "But it's not just the past. Something else stirs beneath the surface." Silas joined them, his silver light piercing the shadowed underbrush. The Voidborn's defeat in the Vale was a blow, but shadows have a way of seeping back into cracks, no matter how carefully sealed. Rin, his form now more solid and radiant, shifted his weight as roots and vines gently wrapped around his limbs, connecting him to the forest's deep heart. There are whispers in the roots, old and new. The forest speaks of a corruption reborn, not of darkness overt, but subtle, insidious. Elias's brow furrowed. "How can we fight what we cannot see? We've been guarding against shadows that stretch beyond our world, and now, one grows quietly beneath our feet." Maeve's gaze was steady, her flame pulsing in tune with the forest's heartbeat. "It is the nature of shadow to hide in the light. We must listen closer, seek deeper truths hidden beneath the soil." Together, the wardens followed the trembling whispers deeper into the forest's core, where ancient trees arched like cathedral pillars and roots twisted thick as ropes, disappearing into the earth. The light here dimmed, filtered through centuries of leaf and branch, and the air grew heavy with a scent both sweet and sour, like blooming flowers over rotting wood. Suddenly, the ground shifted beneath them, a tremor that rippled through stone and soil. From the shadows between the roots, faint glimmers of sickly light pulsed, an unnatural glow that writhed like living poison. Silas raised his lantern, silver flames flaring in warning. "The corruption is not gone. It has taken root, literally." A soft, sinister voice echoed from the depths, almost a whisper carried by the wind. "You healed the Vale, but the darkness grows in the forgotten places where light cannot reach." Elias stepped forward, green flames steady as he responded, "We will not let the forest fall again. We will root out this darkness no matter how deep." From the earth, tendrils of twisted shadow began to coil upward, blackened vines oozing with a creeping darkness. But before they could strike, Rin's form expanded, branches erupting like shields that blocked the shadow's advance. The wardens formed a circle, their flames intertwining, pushing back the corruption with waves of pure energy that cleansed the taint from root and leaf. Yet the whisper remained, fading but defiant. "This forest is ancient and endless. So too is the shadow that waits in its depths." Breathing heavily, the wardens stood in the clearing, understanding that their battle had evolved. The forest was healing, but beneath its renewed beauty, a new threat stirred, one that would require patience, vigilance, and a deeper bond to the land than ever before. Elias looked at his companions, resolve hardening in his eyes. "We've faced the darkness beyond the veil. Now we must become the guardians of the roots, the unseen, the forgotten." Maeve's flame shimmered brighter. "Our journey is far from over. The forest's story continues, and so do ours." The murmuring roots whispered beneath their feet, carrying secrets of shadow and light, waiting for the wardens to listen and protect once more. The wardens stood at the edge of a clearing, the light of their intertwined flames barely cutting through the thick veil of mist that crept low over the forest floor. The trees here were ancient, gnarled sentinels that had stood since the dawn of the world, their bark etched with runes older than any living memory. The air was thick with a heavy stillness, as if the forest itself were holding its breath, waiting. Elias knelt by a massive root exposed by recent rains, fingers tracing the darkened grooves where corruption had taken hold. The twisted shadows clung like ink spilled across parchment, tendrils of rot that pulsed faintly with an unnatural life. He could feel the sickness spreading slowly beneath the surface, like a wound festered but not yet healed. Maeve crouched beside him, eyes narrowed as she scanned the surrounding trees with her blue flame, watching for signs of unnatural energy. "This isn't the Voidborn," she said quietly. "It's something older, something rooted in the forest itself but twisted beyond recognition." Silas stepped closer, his silver light revealing faint sigils etched deep beneath the bark, symbols of wardens long gone, trying to contain the spread of this creeping blight. "These wards have weakened," he said, voice low and grim. "The corruption has been here a long time, growing slowly, waiting." Rin's form flickered as he moved deeper into the undergrowth, merging with vines and moss. "The forest speaks to me," he murmured. "There are echoes beneath the roots, memories of pain and betrayal, and something more, a hunger that has seeped from the earth itself." As the wardens pressed further into the shadowed forest, the ground began to slope downward, leading them into a forgotten hollow where the trees bent unnaturally, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. The air grew colder, and the faint scent of decay thickened into a choking miasma. Elias's lantern flared green, casting eerie light on the cavernous hollow. "This place is a wound in the forest's flesh," he said, voice tight with unease. From the darkness, a low rumble echoed, an ancient growl reverberating through root and stone. The ground trembled beneath their feet as a massive form emerged. A creature born from the forest's pain, a guardian twisted by corruption into a monstrous sentinel of bark and bone. Its eyes glowed with sickly light, its limbs gnarled and heavy with rot. With a deafening roar, it charged, earth shaking as it crashed toward the wardens. Maeve's blue flames leapt forward, weaving barriers of light that slowed the beast's advance. Silas's silver fire cut arcs through the creature's twisted limbs, the clash of flame and rot ringing sharp in the hollow. Elias channeled his green flame into a spear of pure energy, aiming for the heart of the corrupted guardian. Rin called upon the forest's deep roots, summoning vines to ensnare the beast's legs and slow its rampage. The battle was fierce, light and shadow locked in a primal struggle, the forest's fate balanced on a knife's edge. The wardens fought not just to survive, but to cleanse the forest's wound, to reclaim the corrupted guardian's soul hidden beneath layers of rot and rage. As the final blow struck, the creature shuddered, its monstrous form dissolving into a cascade of glowing leaves and gentle light. The forest seemed to exhale, a breath of relief mingling with the fading miasma. But the wardens knew this was only the beginning. The corruption ran deeper than any of them had imagined, woven into the roots, the earth, and the very bones of the forest. Elias looked toward the darkened horizon, determination hardening his gaze. "We will delve into the forest's oldest secrets. To save it, we must understand what birthed this darkness." Maeve nodded, her flame steady and bright. "The past is buried beneath the bark and bone. It is time we unearthed it." Silas's silver light flickered in agreement. "Only then can we hope to protect the forest's future." Rin's roots curled protectively around them, grounding their resolve. The forest waits for its wardens to listen, to act, and to heal. The warden stood at the mouth of a cavern swallowed by creeping vines and ancient roots, a yawning maw in the earth that exhaled a cold breath thick with the scent of damp stone and old decay. The forest's surface had healed, but beneath, an ancient darkness churned, twisting the very bones of the land. Here, the light from their flames struggled to hold back the oppressive gloom. Elias took the lead, his green lantern casting a steady glow that reflected off slick walls veined with shimmering minerals. The air was heavy and still, broken only by distant drips of water echoing through the vastness below. Every step deeper seemed to pull at the edges of his resolve, whispering warnings from the forgotten places where no light had touched for centuries. Maeve followed close behind, her blue flame flickering softly as she traced faint glyphs carved deep into the rock, sigils of wardens long lost, desperate to bind the creeping rot that festered here. "These marks tell a story of sacrifice," she whispered, her voice barely carrying in the cavern's hush. "Generations tried to stop the corruption but were overwhelmed." Silas's silver light shimmered as he scanned the shadows, his expression grave. "The darkness adapts. It's patient, waiting for its chance to reclaim what it lost." His steps were measured, careful, as if the cavern itself might swallow a misstep. Rin's form pulsed with quiet energy, roots slipping through cracks in the stone, seeking the forest's ancient veins. "Beneath the bark and bone lies the heart of the forest's pain," he said. "We must reach it before the corruption spreads beyond healing." The passage narrowed, forcing them to squeeze between jagged walls that seemed to close in, the weight of ages pressing down. The walls whispered with faint murmurs, voices caught between time and stone, echoes of sorrow and rage, of battles fought and lost in darkness. Suddenly the ground trembled beneath their feet. From the shadows emerged twisted shapes, creatures born of rot and shadow, half root, half beast, grotesque guardians of this forsaken realm. Their eyes glowed with malice as they lunged forward, claws scraping stone and earth. Elias's green flames flared into a shield, repelling the initial attack, while Maeve's blue fire shot out in sharp bursts, freezing tendrils that threatened to ensnare them. Silas danced through the fray, silver light slicing the creatures with precise strikes, and Rin summoned thick vines that whipped and bound their foes. The cavern became a maelstrom of flame and shadow, the wardens combined light fighting back the darkness that sought to consume them. With every fallen creature, the oppressive air lifted slightly, revealing a narrow stairway spiraling deeper into the earth. Exhausted but undeterred, the wardens descended, the faint glow of bioluminescent fungi casting eerie hues on walls slick with moisture. At the bottom lay a vast subterranean chamber, the heart of the forest's corruption. In its center, a gnarled root pulsed with sickly light, tendrils writhing like serpents, feeding on the chamber's darkness. Around it lay shattered stones and broken wards, the remnants of ancient battles. Maeve stepped forward, raising her blue flame. "This is the source, an ancient wound in the forest's soul." Elias nodded, lantern blazing. "We must cleanse it, but carefully. This power is raw, intertwined with the forest's very essence." Together they began the ritual, chanting Warden's hymns as their flames wove into a radiant lattice, binding and purifying the corrupted root. The chamber shook violently as the darkness resisted, tendrils thrashing, shadows swirling like storms. But the Wardens held fast, their unity a beacon against the encroaching void. Slowly the sickly light faded, replaced by a soft emerald glow as the root healed, pulsing with renewed life. The cavern exhaled a sigh of relief, the weight of centuries lifting like morning mist. Elias looked at his companions, weariness and hope mingling in his gaze. "The darkness runs deep, but so does our resolve." Maeve smiled faintly. The forest's heart beats once more. Silas's silver light shimmered brighter. But this victory is only the beginning. Rin's roots curled protectively around the Wardens, grounding them to the forest's eternal promise. "We will watch, listen, and guard. The murmuring dark will never claim this forest as its own." As the Wardens ascended from the subterranean heart of the forest, the daylight outside greeted them with a fragile warmth. The once thick shadows along the forest's edge had thinned, replaced by the tentative blush of new growth and sunlight. Yet the air carried an uneasy stillness that even the gentle rustle of leaves couldn't dispel. Elias led the way, his green flame steady but watchful. "We've cleansed the root beneath the earth, but something lingers above, beyond the trees, among the people who live in the forest's shadow." Maeve's gaze shifted toward the distant village, a scattering of wooden homes nestled against the dark line where forest met clearing. The villagers have long felt the forest's pulse, sometimes its breath, sometimes its bite. They will know if the corruption still reaches out. As they approached, the scent of smoke and damp earth grew stronger. The village was alive with activity but carried an undercurrent of tension. Farmers gathered by the wells, faces drawn with worry. Children played quietly, their laughter tinged with a nervous edge. Elders huddled beneath oaks, speaking in hushed tones. At the village center, a woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes approached, her presence commanding yet weary. "You are the Wardens," she said, voice firm but tinged with relief. "The forest has spoken of your deeds beneath the roots. We have awaited your return." Elias inclined his head. "We've cleansed a great corruption below, but we fear its shadow may still touch your lives. Tell us what troubles you." The woman, known as Lyra, gestured to the fields beyond. "The crops wither without reason, and a sickness spreads among the livestock. Some say the forest spirit has grown restless, its whispers turning to warnings. And last night, many heard voices carried on the wind, soft, pleading, but filled with sorrow and fear." Maeve's blue flame pulsed thoughtfully. "The forest's voice is a language of many layers. Sometimes it calls in joy, sometimes in pain. Your people are listening, but they do not always understand." Silas stepped forward, his silver light revealing faint shadowy figures flitting at the edge of vision, ghostly forms of animals and people, caught between worlds, bound by sorrow. These echoes are spirits trapped by lingering corruption or fear. They are not fully lost, but they cannot rest. Rin's form shimmered as he reached toward the trees lining the village's edge. The forest's life and the villagers' lives are entwined. Healing one will heal the other. Over the coming days, the Wardens worked alongside the villagers, mending broken wards, cleansing wells with enchanted flame, and listening to the forest's whispers through Rin's guidance. Slowly, the village began to breathe more freely, the crops standing straighter, the animals regaining vitality. Yet, in the quiet moments, the Wardens discovered a deeper unrest, a tale woven through generations. An ancient pact between the forest and the village, once sealed in trust, had fractured long ago, and the darkness had thrived in the breach. Maeve uncovered old scrolls hidden beneath the village chapel, records of sacrifices and offerings meant to honor the forest spirit and keep the balance. The pact had been forgotten, replaced by fear and neglect. Elias spoke with Lyra beneath the stars. "To protect this place, the bond must be renewed. The forest's heart beats in all of us, Wardens and villagers alike." Lyra nodded, eyes reflecting the firelight. "We will stand with you. Together, we can heal not just the forest's wounds, but our own." As the village and forest began to heal in tandem, the wardens realized their journey was no longer theirs alone. It was a shared story, a tapestry woven from light and shadow, sacrifice and hope, bound by the ancient murmurs that flowed through bark, bone, and soul. The village, nestled at the forest's edge, seemed to breathe in tandem with the warden's renewed presence. Days grew brighter, and nights held a gentler hush, the oppressive weight of shadow lifting like morning fog burned away by the sun. The villagers moved with cautious hope, tending to their fields and animals, sharing stories once forgotten, and weaving rituals anew to honor the forest's ancient spirit. Yet beneath the surface of this fragile peace, something else stirred, unseen and patient. The wardens spent their days in quiet vigilance. Elias and Maeve worked with the villagers to repair wards and strengthen the spiritual bond between forest and folk. Silas studied the arcane sigils scattered through the trees, piecing together fragments of forgotten lore. Rin, ever attuned, wandered the forest's deeper reaches, listening to the murmurs that flowed beneath the canopy. One evening, as twilight bled crimson and violet across the sky, Rin's form shimmered with unease. Returning from a solitary journey, his voice was a low murmur, almost lost in the wind. The forest speaks in riddles. Beneath the healing, a shadow grows, silent but deep. Elias frowned, lantern raised. "What have you heard?" Rin's roots trembled as he spoke. "A darkness older than the Voidborn's touch. It is not corruption but hunger, a void that seeks to consume the forest's life force itself. It is patient and cunning, hiding within the soil and stone, waiting for weakness." Maeve's blue flame flickered nervously. Could it be linked to the fractured veil? Some lingering echo left behind. Silas's silver light pulsed steadily. Or perhaps something entirely different. The forest is ancient and layered. There are forces beyond even the veil that dwell here. That night, the wardens gathered beneath the ancient oak at the village's heart, flames weaving in a circle of protection. They summoned the old songs, calling to the forest's deepest memories, seeking answers in the wind and earth. As their voices rose in harmony, the ground beneath them trembled faintly, and from the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in shifting bark and moss, eyes glowing with a fierce, wild light. The forest warden of old, a guardian spirit bound to the land before any mortal had walked its soil. The spirit's voice was a rough whisper, like leaves scraping stone. "You have mended what was broken and renewed the bond. Yet the forest's heart is not healed. Beneath the roots lies a void, an ancient hunger that even we fear." Elias stepped forward, determination burning in his eyes. "Tell us what we must do." The spirit's gaze flickered toward the horizon where the forest darkened unnaturally. A slumbering force awakens, a creature born from the earth's shadow, older than memory. It feeds not on flesh or flame, but on the forest's very essence. If it stirs fully, all will wither. Maeve's voice was steady but laced with urgency. "How do we stop it?" The spirit reached out, fingers weaving into roots that pulsed with life and shadow. "You must journey deeper than before, beyond the roots and bone, to the well of ages. There lies the heartstone that binds the forest's soul. Only by rekindling its light can you banish the hunger." Silas nodded, resolve sharpening. "Then we must prepare, for this journey will test us beyond anything faced before." The villagers, gathered around the wardens, looked to the ancient oak with reverence and fear, understanding that the balance they had fought to restore was more fragile than ever. Elias spoke softly, "The forest is alive in us all, and its future depends on our courage." As night deepened, the murmuring dark shifted, the ancient forest waiting, watching as its wardens prepared to descend once more into the unknown. The dawn broke over the village with a pale, tentative light, filtering through the boughs like fragile hope stitched across the sky. Yet beneath that fragile brightness, a heavy tension gripped the air, an unspoken understanding among the villagers and wardens alike that the forest trials were far from over. In the village square, a gathering had formed, people from every corner, farmers, hunters, elders, and children, drawn by the warden's resolve and the ancient spirit's dire warning. Faces, both hopeful and fearful, turned toward Elias and his companions. Elias stood before them, the green flame of his lantern steady and unwavering. The well of ages lies beneath the deepest roots, a place where the forest's soul is bound. To rekindle its heartstone, we must journey into the forest's oldest veins, where shadows gather and light struggles to reach. Maeve's blue fire glimmered in the morning light. "We cannot face this threat alone. The forest and the village are intertwined. Your faith, your strength, your knowledge of these lands will be vital." Lyra, the village elder, stepped forward. "Our ancestors once guarded these secrets, but the old ways faded. It is time to remember." We will stand with you." Preparations began in earnest. The villagers gathered supplies, herbs for healing, talismans woven with protective charms, and tools carved with symbols of wardenship. The smiths sharpened blades, while the hunters taught the wardens about hidden paths and the signs of unseen dangers. Maeve led lessons in ritual, teaching the villagers how to weave their intentions into small fires, how to call upon the forest spirit for guidance and protection. Silas worked with the elders to reconstruct ancient wards, their silver light illuminating faded runes on worn stone pillars. Rin wandered the forest, weaving his roots through the earth to awaken the deep magic sleeping beneath the surface. His voice, a soft murmur, carried the warden's resolve into the soil and stone, binding them to the land's pulse. Nights were spent around campfires where stories old and new were shared, tales of wardens past, of darkness fought and light reclaimed, of sacrifice and unity. The villagers, once wary, now found strength in their shared history and the warden's courage. Yet, amid the bustle, quiet moments revealed the creeping doubt. Children spoke of shadows watching from the trees, hunters whispered of silent footsteps where none should tread, and at times the wind carried soft lamentations that chilled the heart. One evening, as the wardens gathered beneath the ancient oak, Rin's form pulsed with urgency. The hunger grows restless. The void beneath stirs in impatience. We must move soon. Elias nodded, his gaze steady. Tomorrow at first light, we begin the descent. Maeve added, this journey will test us, not just in body but in spirit. We must trust in each other and in the forest's strength. Silas's silver light shone with quiet determination. The darkness we face is ancient, but so too is the light we carry. Together we will face whatever waits. As the village settled into uneasy rest, the wardens made final preparations, securing wards around homes, blessing the paths and weaving protective spells into their gear. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the dawn that would bring the next chapter of their journey, one that would lead them deep into the roots of the murmuring dark, to confront the void that threatened to consume all. The first light of dawn barely pierced the thick canopy as the wardens gathered at the ancient oak's roots, their silent sentinel and gateway to the well of ages. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of moss and earth, and a quiet stillness settled over the forest, as if the land itself awaited the moment their journey would begin. Elias adjusted the straps of his pack, lantern glowing steady with a calm green flame. He glanced at Maeve, her blue fire flickering faintly as she traced protective sigils on her skin, murmuring ancient wards. Silas checked the silver blades at his belt, his gaze sharp and measured, while Rin's form shimmered with earthy vitality, roots curling around his feet as if already entwined with the forest's deepest veins. Before stepping forward, Elias raised his lantern, voice low but resolute. The Well of Ages is not just a place, but the forest's very heart. What lies ahead is ancient magic and old pain woven together. We must move carefully, respecting what has endured and facing what threatens to consume. Maeve nodded, voice soft but determined. Our flames will light the path, but it is our bond that will protect us. Together, they stepped toward the great roots coiling around the earth like titanic serpents. The largest among them shifted slowly, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. A spiraling tunnel carved through stone and soil, worn smooth by time and the steady pulse of life beneath the surface. The moment their feet touched the path, a chill ran through the air, carrying a whisper of voices long lost, an echo of forest spirits caught between worlds, caught between light and shadow. The wardens pressed onward, flames weaving a gentle glow that pushed back the surrounding darkness but could not banish it entirely. The tunnel walls seemed alive, pulsating faintly with veins of ancient magic. Maeve reached out, her blue flame flickering as she traced the lines, feeling the forest's memory ripple beneath her touch. This place holds every story the forest ever bore, the joy, the sorrow, the sacrifice. Elias glanced back briefly, seeing the village's distant light barely visible beyond the roots. There is no turning back now. We carry not just our lives, but the future of this forest and its people. As they descended deeper, the air grew cooler and thicker, shadows lengthening and twisting into shapes that danced just beyond the reach of their flames. The wardens moved with a quiet vigilance, alert to every sound, the drip of water, the rustle of unseen creatures, the subtle shifting of stone beneath their feet. Suddenly, a low growl reverberated through the tunnel, a sound ancient and primal. From the darkness emerged a creature unlike any they had seen, a massive wraith of root and shadow, its form shifting and writhing, eyes burning with a hunger that chilled their souls. Elias raised his lantern, green flames flaring into a shield as Maeve's blue fire arced forward, casting frozen shards that slowed the creature's advance. Silas moved swiftly, silver blades slashing precise arcs, and Rin summoned thick vines that wrapped around the beast's limbs, binding its thrashing form. The battle was fierce, light and shadow clashing in a tempest of flame and root. The wraith's tendrils lashed, scraping stone and flesh, but the wardens held their ground, their unity a beacon that pierced the darkness. With a final, combined surge of flame, the creature dissolved into glowing embers, its howl fading into silence. Breathless, the wardens pressed on, deeper into the well of ages, where the heartstone awaited, pulsing faintly with a light both fragile and eternal. Each step forward was a test of will and spirit, the shadows whispering doubts and fears, memories of loss and failure. Yet the warden's bond, forged in fire and shadow, held firm. Elias led the way, lantern steady, voice a whispered vow. For the forest, for the light, we will not falter. As the wardens ventured deeper into the well of ages, the walls around them narrowed, enclosing them in an almost suffocating darkness that no flame could fully penetrate. Their footsteps echoed hollowly on the damp stone floor, and the air grew thick with an intangible pressure, like the weight of countless unseen eyes watching their every move. Elias's green lantern cast trembling shadows that danced along the jagged walls, but even its steady light seemed fragile in this place. Maeve's blue flame wavered as she murmured protective chants, while Silas kept a sharp gaze ahead, his silver blade drawn but cautious. Rin's connection to the earth throbbed faintly, a tether anchoring their minds and spirits as the oppressive atmosphere threatened to pull them under. Then, as if the darkness itself had taken form, the air shifted. Whispered voices slithered into their thoughts, fragments of memories, fears, and regrets, tailored to each of them. The shadows began to weave illusions, testing their resolve. Elias found himself standing alone in a sunlit glade, the vibrant forest he knew twisted into a cruel mockery. The trees were charred and lifeless, the soft moss was replaced by black ash. Voices of lost friends and fallen wardens echoed around him, accusing him of failure. "You were too late," they hissed. "The forest is doomed because of you." He clenched his fists, green flame flickering, but he forced his gaze steady, grounding himself in the truth of their struggle. The sacrifices, the victories, the hope. "I carry the light for all who cannot," he whispered fiercely, dispelling the illusion with a surge of flame. Maeve's trial was a labyrinth of icy corridors, endless and suffocating. Shadows whispered of her deepest fears, that her power was a curse, that her fire would consume those she loved. Ghostly faces twisted in pain reached for her, their cold touch draining her warmth. Her blue flame dimmed, flickering dangerously. But Maeve summoned her strength, recalling the moments of healing, of connection with the forest and her companions. "My fire is a gift," she breathed, "a beacon against the dark." With that, her flame blazed fiercely, melting the ice and shattering the illusions. Silas faced a shadowy mirror, reflecting not his own form but a monstrous being, a void born twisted by rage and hatred. The reflection accused him of being weak, of hiding behind light while darkness festered within. His silver blade trembled in his hand. He stared deeply, seeing not the monster but the pain and doubt behind it. "I am the shield between worlds," he said, voice unwavering. "I will not be broken." The mirror cracked and the shadow dissolved. Rin's connection to the earth was challenged by visions of the forest dying, roots withering, animals fleeing, the land turning barren. His form flickered, and he felt the anguish of centuries of loss. Yet he reached deep, calling upon the ancient spirit within, grounding himself in the eternal pulse of life beneath. "I am the forest's voice," he intoned, "and I will sing through the darkness." His form brightened, the shadows retreating. As the trials faded, the wardens found themselves together again, breaths heavy but spirits unbroken. Before them, bathed in soft, radiant light, lay the Heartstone, the forest's soul, a crystalline core pulsing with fragile green energy. Elias stepped forward, lantern and flame intertwining as he began the ritual to rekindle the Heartstone. The others joined, their flames weaving a tapestry of light and hope, mending the wounds of shadow and decay. The chamber trembled as the Heartstone brightened, flooding the well of ages with warmth and life. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a gentle pulse that echoed through root and branch, stone and soil. The forest's heart beat anew. The warden stood beneath the ancient oak, now fully alive and vibrant, its branches stretching toward the stars. The air was filled with the chorus of nocturnal creatures, a symphony of life reclaimed. Elias spoke quietly, "We are the guardians, not just of the forest but of its story, its memory, and its future." Maeve's flame flickered softly, and as long as we stand, the murmuring dark will never claim this place again. Silas sheathed his blade, a rare smile touching his lips. Our journey continues, but this chapter closes with hope. Rin's roots intertwined with the earth beneath them, grounding their resolve. The forest and its wardens are one, bound by life, shadow, and light. Together, they watch the dawn rise over the canopy, a promise whispered in every ray of sunlight. As long as the forest breathes, so too will the eternal vigil of those who protect it.